Chair. It's 8:30 and we are now live.
I call the meeting to order at 5:30. Vice Chair Jackson presiding, if you will. Present this evening are Commissioners Brown, Clay, and Hart, in addition to myself. Commissioner Garza won't be able to attend. And online, we have Commissioners Hedgewood and Howell. Yes. So we have a quorum and it can proceed. So I would ask for a reading of the land acknowledgement. Cliff,
Okay,
you have it handy?
yes, I'll see if I can see this. Okay, I'll make it bigger. Okay, land acknowledgement. We, the city of Lacey, are on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian tribe and Squaxin Island tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of the land since time immemorial, their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of disposition, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854.
Thank you. Approval of agenda, previous meeting minutes, and consent items. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from, what's that, May?
Moved by Commissioner Hart. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hedgewood online, seconds. Those in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We have no persons pre-registered to speak by way of Zoom as far as public comments are concerned. And having two staff in the audience with us, I see no public present. Therefore, we can dispense with public comments, which will take us into our inspirational item, and that is being provided this evening by Commissioner Clay.
Today I bring something from Archbishop Oscar Romero. He was in El Salvador. He worked closely with for human rights there, and he was assassinated in 1980. So I look to people who have the strength in the middle of some hard times. I look to them to help us in today. It's called Prophets of a Future Not Our Own. This is what we are about. We plant seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that will need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for grace to enter and do the rest. We may never see the end results, but that is the difference between the master builders and the workers. We are workers, not master builders, ministers, not messiahs. We are prophets of the future, not our own. I have some copies here if anybody would like one after.
That's lovely, Annie. Thank you.
Yeah.
That takes us then to our business portion of the agenda. And the first item there being the comprehensive plan update. Our staff Ryan Hendricks.
Evening.
So for those that don't know me, Ryan Andrews, Community Planning Manager in the Community and Economic Development Department. I've been here several times. I think the last time was to go over our community engagement plan with the comprehensive plan update. So back now with a little bit more substance in terms of the comprehensive plan. In front of you, you have the goals and policies that have been under review from the planning commission and the city council over the last several months. And so you are seeing this tonight in basically a version that we did these subsequent meetings with the planning commission and council for them to review these. They did it over 3 different meetings, each one about 2+ hours. And I'm here to give it in about a 30 to 45-minute timeline. So
Thank you.
I'm gonna keep it very high level
Yeah.
and try to keep it moving as quickly as I can. There's a ton of information. There's a lot of information in your packet, so hopefully you were able to get through at least some of it. At the end, I'll talk about the next steps, but the purpose of this is really to get your feedback as we move forward on the goals and policies associated with the comprehensive plan update. Our next step is that we're gonna release this to the public July 1st, give or take. And so this is actually the last step before we start assembling this and having the community review this into the summer. There we go. So by way of a little bit of background. So comp plans, and I might have gone through this the last time, I'm not exactly sure, but this is kind of our centerpiece of local planning efforts. We have a Growth Management Act requirement, a state law requirement that these be over a 20-year time horizon and are updated about every 10 years. And they articulate the city's vision through a series of goals, objectives, policies, and actions that guide decisions of elected officials and local government staff. And really it's about kind of articulating the community's vision through that comprehensive plan. So our goals for this update are to make sure that the plan is readable and usable, that it reflects the community vision that was well established through the community outreach that we did over this last summer and then through the winter time. That I was here with you to talk about the last time. That it integrates and is relatable between the different elements of the comprehensive plan, and I will actually go through each one of those elements tonight. That it's as streamlined as possible and that it meets the state law requirements. Be okay?
Yeah, I'm just checking. There may be some sound issues, so I may interrupt you in just a second.
Okay.
But keep on.
Okay. How are goals and policies created? So we're here obviously tonight to review the goals and policies associated with each element of the comprehensive plan. They're essentially an assembly of the technical analysis combined with the community engagement, and that's this up here. So I'm just gonna. You can see that this is really a combination of those two things, and that's what results in the goals and policies that are part of the comprehensive plan element. So we really look at our current plans, implementing new requirements, and researching other cities' plans and making sure that the goals and policies align with the community vision. Goals, so we're talking about goals and policy. Goals are the overall objectives a city intends to meet in the next cycle. Policies are how we are going to meet those goals. So the goals are at a higher level. Policies say how we're going to do the thing that we set forth to do in the goals. Last time I was here, we talked a lot about community engagement, and through that community engagement process, we established essentially 6 different community priorities. And hopefully as you review the goals and policies, you can see how those community priorities are reflected in each one. So those 6 priorities are connected neighborhoods, focusing on public health and safety, a diversity of housing types, preservation of natural resources, community identity, and economic vitality. So those are the 6 kind of cornerstone community priorities that basically when added together equal the community's vision. So with that, we're going to get right into the first element. And what I'll do is I will get through each one and then pause to see if you have any questions or comments on each one, and then move along from there, if that sounds okay.
Before you get into the elements, let me ask a question.
Absolutely.
In your summary,
Uh-huh.
your big picture, you made reference to conducting audits on the current plans.
Correct.
Would you describe what those audits are like and what you look at?
Yeah, so essentially, I mean, it's an audit, but it's not as fancy as like you might think of like a financial audit or something like that. Really what it is we have generally some checklists that have been developed by the state that say, these are the things that have changed in the last 10 years that you'll need to consider when updating your comprehensive plan. So it's really going through that checklist and then going back to our comp plan and saying, do we meet that checklist or not? So it's a little, it's not, the term audit is used loosely. It's not necessarily like a financial audit or something like that that you might think of that. It's like, you know, basically a checklist exercise that says, here, these are the things you need to do. These are the state laws that have changed. These are the things you need to consider. And then we go through our comp plan and say, okay, does this meet the requirements that the state has given us that's articulated in that checklist?
Okay, so when I saw the word audit of the existing plans, I pictured you looking at the current comprehensive plan and taking a look at, here are the things we said we wanted to do these last 20 years, 10 years. And here's how well we hit those marks. So,
We
It
haven't done
makes
that
sense.
as part of the audit. We are really focusing on this as a brand new comprehensive plan. So while we're using the past plans that we've done as kind of the foundation or the basis, this is really a whole new plan. So this, you know, we're moving from kind of a static plan that sits more on the shelf. That was the last time we did this in 2016 to now being, this will be a web-based plan. And so we're using that opportunity to kind of take a new look at the comprehensive plan overall. So our previous plans had been kind of iterations of our earlier Growth Management Act required plans that started in 1993. So the 2016 version was a slightly updated version that since 1993. This is a whole new plan. So instead of auditing to see what maybe worked or what didn't, we're actually a little bit starting from scratch on this one. So it's a little bit unique. It's an opportunity to make sure that the plan fits closely with the community vision. And this actually came from direction from council. Council really wanted to, quote unquote, have their fingerprints on this comprehensive plan. And so unlike previous updates where we've done more of kind of a staff driven update to the plan, this one has really been done hand in glove with the city council. In fact, as we went to the planning commission, we subsequently also went to the council and presented the same information to them, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, this is really at the kind of the council's direction that they wanted this plan to be, you know, unique. They wanted it to be brand new. They wanted it to be really, you know, representative of their vision on the council, but most importantly, representative of the community vision. Any other questions before I move in?
Maybe just an addition,
Sure.
Brian, because maybe what I heard, Vice Chair, was just kind of on maybe the celebration and accountability of what was in the former plan is maybe what your
Right.
question was.
right, the
centering
goals
on.
that were in the former plan. When I saw audit, I thought you took a look at the former goals to see how close you had come to achieving those things. And then an analysis, if not, why not? Or
Yeah.
we did, we didn't, or you know, that was my thought when I
Yeah.
saw the word audit.
And I think
As
that's,
we
Many
move
of those
into
goals
another
must be
10-year
decent goals
plan.
now.
They are.
How
There
did we
have been.
do on the previous 10-year plan as far as the goals?
Yeah.
That were identified and set aside?
yeah, and I think I think you're on to asking a really good question, and certainly something that we want to pay attention to in the future. And I think, you know, Commissioner Clay just pointed out a good point of, you know, some of the things we're going to look at and some of the things Ryan's going to go through are, you know, in addition to the audit, what's missing, what needs to be replaced is updating some of those goals to continue that momentum. But also recognizing that accountability that you were talking about is certainly something that we are focusing on in more of our plans. I know this group is very familiar, you know, with the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic plan. And that's why we're going to be doing, you know, those types of report outs on kind of how we're doing on an annual basis. But I think that's a really good point and something to think about. So thank you.
I think I don't want to belabor this point, but I think there's a couple reasons why we didn't focus on the previous plans too much either was, number one, we were dealing with a lot of mandates from the state that said, you have to do things, and that will start with the climate element, which is a brand new element, something that we didn't have 10 years ago. So there's a lot of reaction to what's required of us to plan at the state level. And another thing is just, the resource needs. We don't have the resources in our department to be able to go and look back and do. We're on kind of to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing without having the ability to look back quite often. So it's especially with the state mandates and the requirements that are in front of us to meet the deadlines, we're not able to sometimes look back maybe like we should. So with that, let's move into the first element. So we have several that we'll present tonight. So first of all, the climate element, which is now, as I mentioned, we do have a number of state mandates that we're required to plan under, which has certainly grown much more complex versus 10 years ago when we last updated the plan. So for House Bill 1181, so cities planning under the Growth Management Act must have a climate element as part of the comprehensive plan. That climate element is essentially made up of two different sub-elements, and I'll go into kind of what each one is and what they entail. The first one being the greenhouse gas sub-element, and the second being the resiliency, so climate resiliency sub-element. So we'll start with the resiliency first. So we'll talk, and I'm really just going to hit the goals. Happy to talk about it if you do come across any policies you want to talk about as well. But really, the goals and policies for the resilience sub-element came from, much like the other ones, a technical analysis and the results of community engagement and the community's priorities. So the technical analysis started with a vulnerability and risk assessment for climate hazards. It also included the Thurston County 2022 Thurston County greenhouse gas inventory. It audited our current plans. So this was, we say audit a lot, but this is a checklist to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of state law in this case. And that's also through the Department of Commerce's guidance to ensure that we're complying with have in it basically what we need to. The good thing about Lacey, just overall, so every community in Washington that's planning under growth management has to have a climate element now, and the climate resilience needs to be a part of that. The good thing from Lacey's perspective is that we are a very climate resilient community. So we have very little in terms of climate related hazards. So for example, we have heat related climate impacts in the summertime, much hotter now than it used to be. We have wildfire smoke, climate hazards, but we don't have things like, we don't have a lot of building in flood hazards. We don't have sea level rise issues. Some of those things that are, we don't have hurricanes. We don't have, those kinds of things that some other communities may have in Washington or across the nation. So Lacey overall is a very climate resilient community. And so there's not a lot that we have to do to address climate resiliency. But also, I just want to point out that part of the priorities and the goals and policies for this also came from the community engagement. You can read on the screen there some additional key themes, and this will come up in some of the other sections like transportation and other kind of related elements. So as I mentioned, we are required to, first of all, identify the hazards and address those climate exacerbated hazards relevant to Lacey. So for example, heat and wildfire smoke, you'll see goals in there and policies related to things like opening community buildings so that we have places for people to go during those events and those kinds of things. So that's where this is coming from. We also have to look at climate vulnerability across 11 different asset sectors, things like our power grid and those kinds of things. And then also noting every co-benefit associated with each policy. So that's in addition to those climate benefits, what else is benefited through the goals and policies. So we did have an open house. I just wanted to highlight some of the community input that we did receive as a part of that. That was back in February. I think some of you all were there. So these goals and policies were actually drafted at that point. We were able to get feedback on them. We did receive 39 comments as a part of that. And the two that we did get the biggest amount of comments on were number one around urban forests. So people definitely like and appreciate and, consider our urban forest as a great asset here in Lacey, especially talking about things like tree preservations. But there are considerations, especially with climate around diseases and pests and those kinds of things. And we're seeing actually our native tree canopy impacts right now as a result. So things like, drought and those kinds of things over time can impact the hardiness of our urban forestry resources. And then goal 8 around resilient development standards. So priorities around making sure that we are building to be as resilient as possible, reducing wildfire risk. So there is some ability to, or there's some hazard in Lacey to have some risk of wildfire, especially on kind of the urban fringe, we'll call it. But there also is a lot of folks that support solar. So there's kind of this discussion about protection of trees, but then also the ability to be able to support solar. Sometimes those things can conflict. So these are the goals on resilience. I'm going to move into greenhouse gases here in a second. I'm not going to go through each one of those, but hopefully you can see some of these things that I've been talking about, like goal 7, the thriving urban forest, goal 12, accessible shelters. So that's like opening up facilities if we do have, a heat dome or wildfire smoke, those kinds of things. So any questions, concerns, comments on climate resilience before I move to greenhouse gas reduction?
You have like hazard mitigation policy or something like
We
that?
do. Yeah, we have a
How the-
plan for that. We have just like everything, I guess.
Okay.
Planner's got a plan. So we've got plans that are consistent region wide on how we plan for natural hazards and those kinds of things and
And
coordinate
some
with-
man-made too, like I was thinking about the mushroom farm. Was there any contamination there? Was there a lot of mitigation involved?
So when we talk about hazards, that's a little bit of a different type of hazard. We don't necessarily think about things like underground storage tanks or EPA brownfield sites that may be contaminated. Those are handled through different kind of means. This is really about hazards like
Natural stuff?
yeah, or a significant man-made event. If you had a bridge go out or something like that, what would happen? So, that's more along the lines of those kinds of hazards. It's not so much the stuff that happens on like private property that's handled through other things.
So in light of that, looking at the goal number 9, resilient infrastructure, what kind of infrastructure are we talking about?
We're talking about infrastructure. It could be related to things like stormwater. If you had a microburst event like we did 5 or 6 years ago, that we've got the infrastructure in place to be able to handle that volume of water in a short amount of time, so that we're not flooding and causing a bunch of impacts that way. Infrastructure also, and a big issue for us is the power grid, and that's something that is not necessarily something that we have direct impact over. That's Puget Sound Energy, so that's not a city utility, but infrastructure can also be things like our power grid, to make sure that in a cold weather event or extreme heat event, that we have the power grid that's going to be able to support that. That's another infrastructure related item. So that's really what it's talking about, are those things that are either government provided or some private utility provided, that we depend on day to day to make sure that in a case of a climate disaster, that they're going to be there for us when we need it.
I'm thinking about structures like the police station. Is it green built, in the LEED certified or something like that? I mean, is there something in the plan that says we're going in that direction for buildings?
There
for
is.
our
That's around-
city-owned
yeah.
buildings, and then maybe, is there anything for homeowners or renters?
There is. So that's about greenhouse gas reduction. That's
Oh,
going to
okay.
be the next section that I'm
Okay.
going to talk about.
And I will say that the facility that we're building is gonna be highly efficient. And Ryan's gonna talk a little bit more about like potential audits, to use the word again, why not? Let's see how many times we can say it. Tonight of existing facilities. I do just wanna point out that with things like, LEED certifications, that's an organization and they have a very specific set of things that you
Yeah.
need to cut and qualify and get kind of registered for. So
Yeah,
that facility is not going to meet necessarily LEED, but it is going to be a highly efficient building.
Or maybe this would be a good segue. So feel free if you have any climate resilience comments along the way, take those. We'll still talk about that here as well. So let's move on to the greenhouse gas sub-element. So this one must address greenhouse gas emissions and steps to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the Lacey community. So a big part of that and a new part, this is all new, but the state is requiring us to address VMT, which is vehicle miles traveled in our community, and identify the steps to reduce the vehicle miles traveled in our community. And so this gets to the co-benefit section as well, as you'll see a lot of overlap in the transportation section of our comprehensive plan as well, related to this. So the goals here for greenhouse gas reduction is, number one, implementing the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. So that's a whole separate plan that the community has adopted that sets forth city as an organization priorities for reducing greenhouse gases, but also the community at large. And so these are things, this supports things like greenhouse gas reduction for private citizens through things like grants, or right now we're working on a project called Energize Thurston that is, you may have heard of it, that's providing for income qualified residents heat pumps so that they can transition away from natural gas and go more fully electric. And for those that maybe are above the income thresholds, they're doing a group purchase of heat pumps and then having those installed. So that's where initiatives like those are born out of, is that Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. The second goal, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by incentivizing the use of renewable energy, conservation and efficiency technology and practices of buildings. So Commissioner Clay, this goes to yours about, how do we make sure that we're doing that? And buildings is used kind of, in general here. So that would be city buildings, but also buildings around the community. Our two biggest emitters of greenhouse gas are in our community are number one, I think number one is buildings and number two is transportation. So those are our two biggest greenhouse gas sources in Thurston County. And then goal 3, develop guidelines for the adaptive reuse of buildings. So this also gets back to kind of the building issue as well. So these are things kind of I've already talked about: tree canopy, balancing that with solar access, reducing vehicle miles traveled, because that is, as I mentioned, a large source of greenhouse gas emissions in our community. A way we can also do both of these things is supporting increasing urban density and housing diversity. So making sure that people live closer to where they work, et cetera, so that we're reducing those vehicle miles traveled, but then also making sure that we have the diverse housing needs that our community desires. And then this also relates to a previous question as well, is about the police station, is that the city of Lacey as an organization actually has some requirements to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions organization wide. So you can see the numbers there on the screen, but essentially it is to achieve net zero by the year 2050. So by the year 2050, so 25 years away, the city is to be net zero in terms of, so that's all of our, I think that's our buildings, that's our city fleet. That is also things like one of the, other than buildings and our fleet, for greenhouse gas emissions as a community, or for Lacey as an organization, our third biggest is actually pumping of water. So our water pumping stations actually are the third highest greenhouse gas emitters in Lacey. But we do a lot of this already. We're implementing these things. We are moving towards a green fleet. We buy all green power. And so a lot of those things go a long way to meeting that net zero goal.
water towers, if you like pump it up, do water towers save emissions because it's not running a pump all the time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in theory, you have to run a pump to get the water into the water tower, but once it's there, it creates capacity that is gravity fed. And so,
Cause there's a couple new ones around.
yeah, and those, I'm not the right person to talk exactly about, but you know, one of those things is it kind of like builds up at night and then during the day in times of higher flow, it tends to, so it's not like it just sits there all day. It just, you know, at a certain level, there's a high fluctuation of water depending on the demand.
System capacity, right? I think similar
Yeah.
to that.
Any other questions on greenhouse gas before I move into housing?
I had one little
Comments?
idea, you know, that we're a tree city and you're not supposed to take down a tree unless you know you can put a new one in. I was just thinking about the parks, like Cuscio Park, like we could start our own little forest. Like I have to cut down this tree, but I'll buy a tree in the for the Lacey Forest.
Yeah,
I just
no,
thought that was kind of.
that's a great idea. I like it. We do allow some of that more as like a developer. They can actually, you know, purchase and transfer property or buy credits to, you know, take down trees. So there's some mechanisms within our development code to be able to do that, but you know, just general residents, we don't really have that option at this point.
On goal 5, Ryan, reduce vehicle miles traveled.
Mhm.
How is that goal gonna be approached?
Yeah, so, you know, I think there's a couple parts of that. Obviously, you look at that and you think, okay, first thing is like transportation to make sure people, you know, maybe you can incentivize people to ride the bus or, you know, walk or bike more often. But also a large part of that is land use, to make sure that we have land uses that are actually closer in proximity to each other. So it doesn't require you to use your car wherever you go. So that can be more dense residential areas in closer proximity to commercial areas that provide the day-to-day needs for the community. When we did the outreach to the community, we heard that loud and clear. People want more places that are like around the corner from them that they can just walk and bike to without having to, you know, drive to get there. And so that's you know, those are the two main things. Number one is probably transportation, you know, and options there. But the second is the land use and making sure the land use is in place to give people the opportunity to have that, you know, area to walk and bike to.
Are you guys considering any of the unincorporated areas too, where it might be a little bit harder to get around, to?
So, yeah, that's a good question. This plan itself really only applies to the Lacey city limits. So we do kind of set the foundation for what the future, we have what's called a joint plan with Thurston County that says how the urban growth area will develop. This will set the stage for a future update to that plan. So we do coordinate with Thurston County on that end of things. If you do look, and I don't have a map here in front of me, but our urban growth area, other than the Martin Way corridor, is highly residential. So it's, you know, from a zoning perspective, on a zoning map, yellow is pretty much always residential. If you look at our urban growth area east of the city limits here, is that you know, a high proportion of it is residential. So
Like one of those UGA area individuals, and so
Yeah.
it's getting increasingly bigger. And the line, I'm like right there on the line, so that I would assume would be a concern as we look into growing and expanding that in the future.
Yeah, so, you know, the interesting thing about like changing the zoning in unincorporated Thurston County, we as a city can't do that. That has to be done by the Thurston County Board of Commissioners. We can suggest, we can persuade, we can try to, you know, say, hey, our plan says this, and you should think about adopting it, but the decision makers there are actually Thurston County. And you know, and there are some small neighborhood commercial kind of centers around our urban growth or in our urban growth area. If you think about like the site where the Evergreen Ballroom used to be, there's a gas station, and so, you know, so there's some of that there. The Union Mills Grocery, which is on right there, that's it. Yeah, on Pacific, that's in Thurston County. So are some small, you know, neighborhood commercial areas, but they're pretty limited in the UGA. Most of it is residential.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to housing. So much like the climate part. There's also a large state push right now to do more related to housing at a state level. And there is a lot of things that went into development of the housing element, goals and policies. And so I'm not gonna go in too deep into this slide, but it's basically showing that we have to do all of these different things that leads up to our housing element. And the next slide actually shows quite well, and I'm not gonna read through all of this different legislation, but there is a ton of, and this doesn't include anything from the last legislative session. This all was pre-2025 legislative session that we have to consider in updating our comprehensive plan. So this is things around things like housing equity, middle housing. So we're right now developing regulations to allow up to 4 units per lot, which is we're required to do by the end of this year. House Bill 1337 there in the middle is around accessory dwelling units that would allow up to 2 accessory dwelling units in most areas. House Bill 1998, which is around co-living. So that's things like, I also call this kind of like single room occupancies. So this is where you maybe rent a room and there's several of you renting a room, but you share like a kitchen in the middle. So almost like a dormitory style.
College dorm.
Yeah. And then the last one there on the right, 5258, which is it's called unit lot subdivisions. It's basically a way to be able to subdivide off a lot that's around an accessory dwelling unit typically. So it's a way to be able to sell, typically accessory dwelling units are like granny flats or, so maybe that's over your garage or attached to your house. A separated, detached accessory dwelling unit now can be sold through a subdivision process. Before you could rent them out, but you could never sell them. Now this will give a ability to be able to sell those units individually.
So, we have to go back to, so what is the plan? How's the plan addressing this first one, equity in housing?
Especially through the goals and policies that, we have done and are currently completing a racially disparate impacts analysis. So we actually had to go through and identify areas of our community that are at most risk of being displaced. And so there was a couple recommendations that are coming out of that. Hopefully they're reflected in some of the goals and policies, but the biggest, what it identified was the biggest risk for our community are number one, mobile and manufactured home park residents. And they're at the biggest risk of essentially economic displacement, because the risk is that they don't own the property underneath of them. They only own the unit themselves. And there's issues associated with what if that property was sold and redeveloped for another purpose. And then there's the second, which is kind of what the term naturally occurring affordable housing. So that's things like old homes and those kinds of things that are rented at a lower rate that could be a house that maybe is in an older neighborhood where somebody would want to demolish it and put up additional units in its place. So those are the two that we identified as part of that racially disparate impacts analysis. We also, we have to look at our policies through that lens, and we look through that lens. What it found, and part of this is the benefit of Lacey being developed after things like Fair Housing Act and the Civil Rights Act and those kinds of things, which was very good for us because, some communities struggle a lot with redlining or have struggled with redlining in the past. Lacey being a community only since the 60s, we have some benefit that predated some of that stuff. So Lacey, and we have some expertise in the room, was a place where people actually landed instead of were pushed away from. And then also as a part of that, we're looking at areas that may have covenants like in place. That may have been in place. We've done an analysis of all of our covenants in Lacey, and we don't have any of those here either. So we have a little bit of the benefit of being a newer community that maybe some of our neighbors that have been around longer, but have a little bit more work to do on that front than we do.
So there's no historical district or anything around this area?
Yeah.
Well,
It's newer.
Any hand up?
Yeah, you wanna?
I was gonna say, this brings up a subject I was gonna comment on under my commission report. On Saturday, there was a housing justice forum that the county auditor's office held. And I participated as one of the speakers on it. But the research was presented by the University of Washington on the study they've been undertaking for the last 2 years on racially restricted covenants on properties in the state of Washington. But on Saturday, they were presenting on Thurston County. And to my amazement, I had been tracking and following what the auditor's office had identified on their own and had come up with 336 parcels with these racially restricted covenants. Well, the university's research is showing over 1,700, and the number is still growing. And that floored me. That really floored me. Some are individual plats, some are whole subdivisions, some with the covenants written into the HOA agreement. And they had an interactive map. We didn't really see that much of it to see where those 1,700 parcels are. But in the 336 that had earlier been identified, Lacey wasn't included. But I'm anxious to see that bigger map. And to
There are
see
some in.
now with more than 1,700 in Thurston County, because so much of the surrounding area of Lacey used to be unincorporated.
Right.
And so territory that's been annexed and incorporated, how much of that, if any, might some of those racially restricted covenants still exist? And they actually had pictures of the covenant language. There shall be no Negro of Negro blood, sold to, rented to, leased, allowed to, unless in a servant capacity. And the later ones would just say no one of non-white ethnicity shall be allowed. So it wasn't as graphic and harsh, but and also in the report, the auditor's office had sent out letters to those 336 they could identify per the legislation. And the question was asked how many of those had really taken advantage of the voluntary disclaimer that the legislation allowed. And only 17 of the 336 had come into the auditor's office and exercised that disclaimer opportunity. So, 1,700 now and growing because the project ends the end of this month and they're still analyzing data. So I'm just curious where Lacey and our growth area and surrounding areas, and the reason most of it was in Tumwater and Olympia was because they're older communities since the 1800s. And like you said, Lacey just since the 1960s. But I'm curious to see if some of those thoughts and ideas carried over. And the research also talked about the entities that enabled those covenants, like the lending institutions that were discriminatory, the real estate organizations that wrote into land descriptions these same things. It was a very thorough piece of research that there was a good crowd of people and certainly with a lot more to do. And I asked the question, I said something about all of the cities and the areas are now dealing with the comprehensive plan and how that was going to be an opportunity to make sure that these racially restricted policies weren't being perpetuated on into the next 10-year plan. So this is real, more real to me since Saturday than it was before. You know, but people were commenting about how much that explained about things, you know, how it is, and I've commented on this a number of times, how it is that Lacey and its environs is the most diverse community in the county. And it's because of these racially restricted covenants, practices by real estate entities that would not show you a property to rent or to buy. And it wasn't an accountability issue, affordability issue, I mean.
Yeah.
It was a racial discriminatory issue. And the systemic nature of it all, with the lending institutions, the real estate institutions, you know, and all of this along those same trails. And so the disparity in generational wealth that's been missed out on, and that research went back to the 1920s. And beautiful color bars and charts and graphs and, you know, so a whole new cadre of data in this whole key housing kind of thing that's entered into it.
And then what is that gonna look like now that you got the younger people that can't afford? You know, is that gonna turn into a whole nother thing where it's not really racially, but now we're looking at, okay, well, you don't have all of this money, so, you know, is that gonna be another thing that's gonna disparage other people, younger people from being able to get housing?
At one other point, I think we can't let Lacey just say, well, the law against the redlining happened in 1968 and we didn't incorporate till what, I can't remember.
It was 66. but-
66.
Yeah.
The lending institutions and the real estate were still doing it. That didn't mean that everything stopped and then we all got fair. So we have those, you know, those discrepancies, those, you know, over generations that we need to look at
Yep.
in our plan.
And one other aspect of it, I'll kick in just for information purposes. There was legislation passed that put into place a Black homeowners initiative. But the interesting thing about that is, if you were in the area before 1968, your kids, your family members, or whatever, could access the elements of that initiative. And I use myself as an example. It didn't come to to Lacey until 1971. So the 1968 has nothing to do with helping my kids or grandkids access this Black home ownership. And the report that they presented showed the demographic changes as well. So before 1968, there were only 207 Blacks in Thurston County. So how many, you know, home buyers is that Black at Home initiative gonna help? And with only, so all of this gets tied into this, and it's just really brought to home as I was reviewing the comprehensive plan. And Annie asked the perfect question of this equity in housing. What does that mean? You know, in light of these systemic discriminatory practices that have been around so long. And I know when we moved here, there were places realtors just would not show us. And this research references several portions of the book I did. And I shared when I talked the fact that when the question was asked in these oral interviews, what was the issue that stood out in your mind most prevalently? And to a person, it was housing discrimination, inability to find housing. And in these stories, people actually told stories of white friends that had to front for them to rent an apartment. You know, that kind of thing. And it hasn't gone away in certain little nooks and crannies of Thurston County. Uh, so this is a huge issue from the point of view of where we go as a community, where we go as a county, and what stuff is still lingering around. And a number of people who were there Saturday said, I'm going home and reread my deed to see if I'm living on a piece of property that I'm totally unaware of, has a racially restrictive covenant on it. And Mary Hall, the auditor, indicated that they're going to do another round of sending out letters to everybody that they can identify now that the number is up to 1,700. And try one more time, since only 17 out of the 336 actually exercised that free option. So it's a whole new element when we start talking about equity in housing. And
John has his hand up.
oh, I'm sorry,
Somebody has
is a hand?
Oh, John.
Okay, John, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was gonna effectively say the same thing you did as well, Vice Chair. You hit a lot of key points that I also wanted to talk about. I will just add that Lacey may have been technically spared from housing discrimination, but that does not mean that we are not formed also by it. I heard the Evergreen Ballroom being mentioned earlier, which I haven't heard mentioned in some time, and that was long before I came to this area. But there's a reason why. It was a venue that was one of the only ones in Thurston County that hosted race music, as they termed it at the time, or other performers of color. And there's a reason why Lacey is still the most demographically diverse city in the county. And a lot of that is because of redlining. So just because Lacey wasn't directly a part of or complicit with redlining does not mean that we don't suffer from its detrimental effects and generational legacy of those impacts, even to today. And as our vice chair has very eloquently described, a lot of those impacts that we still suffer from. But I just wanted to mention that piece as well.
Thank you, John. I'm sorry that went so long.
Good discussion.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. And one of the things, I just wanted to touch on before I do get into the goals and policies on this section is that this is informed by a lot of housing planning that the city has been doing for a number of years. And then also, I just wanted to highlight that included in this list is the integration of the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging plan. So that's a part of the housing element development of those goals and policies that we leaned on that document as well, which is fantastic. I just wanted to hit a little bit on the community engagement here as well. We did a number of surveys, couple surveys, and one specific for housing, but then we also did the open house as well. Here it shouldn't be any surprise, some of the feedback we got, people want kind of more housing options, more housing around commercial areas, like I mentioned, so that we have a better integration of some of the land uses. Concerns over housing affordability, which is no surprise, I think, to anybody here. But then also some other concerns around kind of design of housing, making sure that we preserve a natural green space, environmental impacts, the parking concerns, those kinds of things as well. So, kind of runs the gamut there of all the feedback we got, but is generally consistent with those things that we've heard across the board as we've been working on housing issues for the last decade or so. So here are the housing goals, or the first page of the housing goals. So I'll get to this section. We'll take a pause for any questions or concerns you may have, but focusing on, I'll just focus on a couple here, point them out. Goal 2 is around equitable, inclusive housing distribution. So that builds on conversation that the Commission on Equity has been having tonight. Things around goal 5 here around unhoused population. So while this section itself does not generally dive into too deep homelessness issues, it does get into how do we have places around the community for unhoused populations to live. Things like Maple Court out in Hawks Prairie is a good example of where we have shelters and those kinds of things in the community. Let's see, yeah, and then I'll just point out maybe like goal 9, which is a common theme that I've been talking about tonight. So ensuring housing and land use policies support a well-connected, sustainable, and livable community. So making sure that we have places to live and work in our community. So people that work here don't need to live in Shelton, Mason County, Lewis County, because that's what all they can afford, is that we have places here in our community that people can work and live in the same place. So through our outreach over the last many years, a lot, it used to be growing up here, Lacey was kind of a bedroom community for Olympia. Now that's changed a lot. Lacey is now a bedroom community for Pierce County and places north. So, we hear people that say, hey, I sleep in Lacey, but 12 hours out of the day, I'm not here, right? Because 2 hours I'm commuting north, I'm working for 8 hours, and then 2 more hours I'm commuting south. So, how do we make sure that we connect people between their home life and their work life so that they can do both here in Lacey? So with that, I'll just leave that there before we get into land use. Any comments, questions, concerns on housing before we move into the next section?
Shannon?
And before we move on, so I did find the study from UW with the interactive maps, and so I will send that out in our follow-up email so you all can take a look at the maps and dive into that information a little bit more.
Gosh, great call.
Could you send me that?
Absolutely.
Thanks, that'd be really interesting. That sounds like some interesting work. All right, so let's move into land use. So it's funny, land use elements used to be the kind of the cornerstone or the hallmark of a comprehensive plan update, and usually the thing that was kind of had the biggest update associated with it. And I'll say frankly that the state legislature is so focused on climate and housing that they kind of left land use alone. And so we don't have a lot of changes to the land use element other than some of the things on the screen there. So there are some things that have been changed kind of at a minor level in the GMA that we've had to address. But one of the bullets that I want to point out is that third one there, which is now there is an environmental justice requirement. So that means that we give special consideration to environmental justice and our goals and policies, including efforts to avoid creating or worsening environmental health disparities. So that's a new thing that we haven't had to kind of deal with before in land use elements of the comprehensive plan. The good news is that when you look at environmental health disparity information for Lacey, the maps that have been created at the state level, is that much like climate issues and some other issues, we have the benefit of not having things like big contaminated sites and those kinds of things. And so our environmental health disparities, it really shows that the biggest environmental health issue we have is actually Interstate 5. And it's the air quality associated with Interstate 5 that's the biggest issue. So, what that does is lead you to think like, well, you don't put your low income housing and those kinds of things right up against I-5, because those are the people that can be the most susceptible to the the environmental health issues associated with that. So there's some other things on the screen there, some other kind of policy foundations that we've used to inform the draft goals and policies. So it's consistent with our other documents along the way. So here are 13 different goals. So these are all of the goals for land use. So you'll see some things that touch on much of what we talked about tonight around development, housing diversity, multimodal connectivity, which is walking and biking. I'll point out, I think, 2 things here on the right-hand column that are worth talking about a little bit more. Obviously, we touched on environmental justice a little bit, but goal number 8, strengthening Lacey's unique identity. We heard a lot from the community in our feedback through surveys and through open houses and those kinds of things, is that people love living here, but they feel like sometimes it just lacks a sense of place. That there's just not this thing that kind of connects us all. There's not this place that's uniquely Lacey, and so they want to build on that identity part of things. So that's a big thing that we've heard from the community. And that doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be provided by the city. That could be an area that is provided by the private sector. So a lot of things we've heard is, back when South Sound Center was a mall, that was the place that kind of connected the community, because that's where you would have the 3rd of July fireworks. That's where you would have, music in the mall at Christmas time. You would have those kinds of things that was kind of the Lacey Community Center back in the day. Once that was gone, we've never really replaced that as a community. We've never had that central gathering point that's kind of connected us all. So that's something that just I wanted to point out that I think is worth talking about a little bit and having kind of addressed in the plan. And then the third, goal 13, which is, it doesn't touch on the Commission on Equity much, but I just wanted to make you aware that there are a number of discussions happening, especially at the council level, around annexation. We have a city council that is very pro annexation, so that's incorporating areas in the urban growth area and bringing them into the city. And so you'll see some brand new goals, and they're related to annexation and how the city deals with that. So happy to talk about any one of these. Those are a couple that came to my mind as I was going through them, but any questions, feedback, concerns on any land use goals and policies that you might have seen when you were reviewing?
A general question, in this previous slide where you were showing where the plan we had come up with was one of the touchstones. How are things actually integrated in or intertwined in, other than just making a general statement that the strategic plan of the Equity Commission was looked at or utilized as we put this plan together?
Yeah, so I think there's the way you do that is through implementation. So it's making sure that as we have from a planning perspective, to make sure that when we are making decisions or the council is making decisions, that we're analyzing those decisions not only against the comprehensive plan, but things like the DEIB plan as well. And so it needs to be coordinated and consistent amongst the plans, but when it comes down, when the rubber meets the road, we need to make sure that we're using these resources we've developed as a community to inform our decisions. And so, that's things like, city staff, when we're recommending something to the council, is to say, okay, not only how does it meet the comprehensive plan, but how does it meet the DEIB plan, so that there's that information is brought to the table when those decisions are made, so there's a fully informed decision at the time something is implemented.
So would the plan include an introduction of some kind, a preamble of some kind that says, make some reference to the plan having been put together, looking through an equity lens kind of statement?
Absolutely.
Preamble.
Yeah, absolutely. And the advantage of doing a website is that everything is linkable, right? And so the thing we can just say is like, hey, this is, part of, and here is all the plans that we utilize when developing the comprehensive plan. And the DEIB plan is just literally linked there, and somebody can click on it and get to it, right? So that having a website as a comprehensive plan is going to be a powerful tool that helps us make sure that the community knows all of the different plans and resources that the city has when making those decisions. So I think it's going to be a fantastic tool versus you think of 10, 15 years ago when you'd have this plan sitting next to this plan, sitting next to this plan. The community members themselves didn't even know those plans existed. And so, in order to see if one was consistent with the other, you'd have to flip it open, you have to, so now having that all together, making sure that the comprehensive plan is kind of like a seamless website that hosts all those things is going to be a fantastic opportunity.
So this livability here, oh yeah, click that, and here's livability in this.
Yeah, and what we're, the way we're setting up the website is that so that people can search when they get on there and they say, okay, I want to see all of the housing element policies, they can do that. But if they want to see everything related to housing, because there could be housing stuff in land use, there could be housing stuff in, greenhouse gas reduction, is that they can then sort by topic as well. so that it's not just siloed in an individual element. I'm doing that tonight for the purpose of kind of ease of review. But at the point, it's gonna be, being able to be sorted by topic. And so you can see that everything is related to everything, that we're just not siloing these into individual elements.
I just found out that there's two more ways that I see too, where you can see the equity plan reflected in the work that's currently being done. So if you look at the draft that's presented today, the team's done a really good job of highlighting where there's co-benefits. And so you can see in some areas where it is marked equity, and you can see some of the goals that were established with the diversity, equity, inclusion plan coming out. So I've just got a couple of them, and it's talking about, targeted outreach to make sure that we're hearing from and getting information to voices that maybe haven't in the past had the same access or have had barriers to getting that information. So you can see that infusion of the plan within some of the goals and some of the policies. And the second thing I would highlight is just this activity that's going on here tonight, right? So you all are the experts who helped put together the diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging strategic plan, and these types of opportunities to continue to review the drafts of the plans and to provide feedback so that we can bring forward the best draft to the community to review. So this is a really important step.
I had a question about, could you give me a little synopsis about goal 10? Because for some reason, when I look at goal 10 and goal 8, I think the two of those could work together. Or goal 10 could help define goal 8 a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think they're a little bit different. Goal 8 is about
Community
Lacey's,
engagement.
it's more about identity. It's more about who we are.
Okay.
Number 10 is more about engagement in terms of how do we get, the stakeholder, the feedback, those kinds of things as we, make decisions as a community. How do we involve the community as a whole?
Right.
So number 10 is more about like engagement. Number 8 is more about identity.
Right, but I think if you could figure out 10, it would help to figure out how do you strengthen the
Absolutely.
identity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you gotta know who I mean, in a business sense, you gotta know who your target audience is. If you don't
Right.
know your target audience, then how do you know you're engaging the community the correct way?
Right.
If you're engaging the community as we're more corporate and industrial when we're actually more entrepreneurial, which is more small business. I think those two things go hand in hand in gearing how we identify as a community.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think they're very related. I don't have the policies in front of me. Here, but I would, if you're, if you got some good suggestions as far as how maybe, those things could be combined, definitely let me know. And follow up with an email would be just fine. We're not gonna be able to get to everything tonight, so.
No, but I looked at that and I was like, oh, I wonder if those two, okay.
The question I was asking a minute ago about intro language in the overall plan. It's a huge plan with all of these component parts. Some intro statement aside from what the government language dictates that has to be there. But the city of Lacey is a community of da 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 da. This plan encompasses the following values or that kind of intro, because in our DEIB strategic plan, we have a strong introductory statement that sets into place everything else that follows. And we start by talking about the murder of George Floyd and the climate in the country that it created and where equity became, a big issue. And so the plan just kind of flows from there. And so that was the kind of question I was asking about some intro language to the overall plan that gets above and beyond just what the government language is that says House Bill whatever mandate da 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 da. But Lacey is so unique in so many ways, and even though an introductory statement might not be required, I mean that would just this is a statement of intent, of vision. We're still young and compared to our surrounding areas, and we y'all come. We're saying everybody's welcome, but So I think my answer is no, there's not an introductory statement of value that drives this comprehensive plan for the next 10 years as best you can. But that would be something I would
That's a great suggestion.
suggest if after it's all said and done and you're writing the final top piece or something that really stands out about the city of Lacey, what we believe in, what our values are. And as a result of it, here's our guide to the kind of community we hope to put in place over the next 10 years. That kind of.
Yeah, nope, absolutely. We want, and yeah, that's a
And giving
point well
credit
taken.
to the community members that came forward that they're really a part of this too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I love that. And I think that's definitely something we want to make sure we achieve. Unfortunately, tonight you're seeing kind of more of the nuts and bolts part of it, and that's really what we want the feedback on. We will definitely, take that comment to heart and make sure that we're.
Yeah, we didn't think we'd
achieving
see you again before it's the final thing on July 1 when it becomes public. So this was the chance to get
Yeah,
that in there.
yeah.
I'm not overlooking a hand on the screen. No, I don't see a hand. Any other questions of Ryan?
Well, we still have 3 more to go.
Oh, 3 more
Sorry,
hands to go.
Yeah, sorry to burst your bubble. I could do it quick.
No, take your time. It's important.
So economic development is actually not a required element. So we don't actually need to address economic development in our community, but we have for a number of years because there is an importance to making sure that we have economic development opportunities for our community. So there's a number of guiding documents here on the screen. I'm not going to go into any real detail on any of these, but understand that they exist and they've long set the foundation for what we do from an economic development standpoint. Here is some of the feedback we've been receiving or have received through community engagement. So one of the things I'll just note here in economic development is in addition to things like open houses and surveys, we've also done a number of business walks. So we actually have an economic development coordinator, Wesley, that may have been here before, that actually goes out and visits businesses and solicited their feedback through just basically face-to-face engagement, going out and visiting those businesses. You can see some of the things on the bottom there, what people commented on, things around zoning and entrepreneurship and those kinds of things. But we continually hear great feedback about the night market events and the food trucks and those kinds of things, and how that's really giving people a great place to gather. We talked about that. How does these co-benefits, how do we make sure that we're giving Lacey some identity, but then also kind of raising up the entrepreneur community in our community? That's just a fantastic example of all of that. So here are the economic development goals. This is just the one slide I have here. So things like promoting a positive business climate, diverse economy, those kinds of things, which should be no surprise. Socially, environmentally sustainable business and development. And then the last one there, adequate and reliable housing, public facilities, infrastructure that support economic growth and activity. Any questions, feedback, comments on economic development?
Would either of those goals infer attracting more industry?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's
promote, encourage, foster, preserve, ensure.
Yeah. So there's 2 parts of it. The economic development is like, supporting the businesses that are already here.
Right.
And how do we find them maybe space to grow or, employees, employee training, those kinds of things. But also it's about encouraging businesses to come to Lacey. So that's, through efforts of catering to companies to, come here to show them, what we have in terms of amenities and workforce and education and those kinds of things. And so that's a big part of this as well. What we heard from the community, the community, they've got some definite desires when it comes to this. I'll say the biggest one is a grocery store north of I-5. So how do we encourage that? Like, how do we, talk to the right people that are going to make the decisions to come to our community, put a grocery store on the north side of I-5? But then also a big part of the outreach and feedback was people wanted to see Lacey businesses grow from within. They didn't necessarily care that we went out and got the latest, fast food chain or those kinds of things. They wanted to see that we were fostering, local Lacey businesses. So those were the two, when I was, out there doing the feedback with the community, those are the two themes that I heard along the way related to economic development. Making sure that we're being local in terms of our entrepreneurship, but then also making sure that we get a grocery store north of I-5.
And one of the comments we heard last week at the Veterans Forum was the need for more in industries, because as people are pouring into Lacey and a lot of veterans and they're retiring and this kind of thing, they want to have jobs. And the other aspect of that was, how do we help our young people decide to come back and live here? And if there are no jobs for them, they're gonna move elsewhere.
Yes.
And so that's why I asked the question about, trying to attract more industries.
Yep, and more family wage jobs, which then, talk about co-benefits, well, that, then people are able to live here, so they're able to afford housing if they're being paid a, decent wage. So, all those things are certainly related. And we do, a number of things from an economic development front. We're obviously a member of the Economic Development Council that's charged with trying to bring more family wage jobs to the region. Unfortunately, we're just not able to control the private market.
Right.
And so, while we may have some of the area to be able to, that would be able to provide family wage jobs, it's up to the market to supply those. So it's up to those, sectors of the economy to provide those family wage jobs in our community. So we try really hard, though, when we do our recruitment to, recruit those higher paying wages across our community, for sure.
And then you've got the same thing with local businesses. We're having a tough time right now, trying to expand or even going into, I know I've mentioned it before, as far as trying to find locations that are affordable to a small business to be able to go in and rent, or probably not own. So most likely we're gonna have to rent a location that's not gonna be, 800 plus utilities. It's gonna be much more than that. But we also still have to kind of get our business up and going off the ground too. So yeah, you got the biggest big box places, but then the smaller ones that can't necessarily do it within their home, but they can't afford to go out and have a place outside of their
Yeah.
home.
Yep. And unfortunately, there's just not a lot of those places here to be
No.
able to do that. And anything that's new, unfortunately, the downside with, it's great to see new development and new businesses coming in. But anything that is new is gonna be at the highest level of that market in terms of
Yes.
rent. And so
Yeah.
that's gonna not attract the local folks, that's gonna attract the national tenants that can afford it.
And so then you got, okay, well, we've got the entrepreneur and we're supporting them or doing all this, that, the other, but staying power, they're not gonna be able to stay as long as well. So what do we do to fix that, so.
Okay, anything else on this one? Okay, two more to go, transportation and then utilities. So we've talked a little bit about transportation already tonight related to some of our other elements like greenhouse gas reduction and land use and those kinds of things. But much like some of the other plans, we have a number of plans that this is based on. One that I'll point out here on this list is our city's pedestrian and bicycle plan, which kind of shows where pedestrian bicycle projects will be developed over time in Lacey. And so that's a great plan that was done about 6 years ago that really highlights the need for more pedestrian bicycle facilities in Lacey. I did want to point out, we have the 2030 plan on the left. That was the last plan that we adopted, which was in 2012. So it's getting fairly old at this point. And so this will be a pretty wholesale update to our transportation plan. The previous plan related to transportation had 20 goals and over 120 policies, and we're really streamlining that down to 6 goals and 35 policies. So it'll be pared down quite a bit from previous versions. So a little highlight on community engagement. So, a lot about pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure that the the residents really want expanded networks and quality, accessible neighborhoods with walkable amenities. We've talked about that. And then concerns over sprawl and dependent developments. And you can see, and I think this is part of some other slides that were previous here, but some comments that we received as part of the feedback as well. So there's definitely a community support for, a car light lifestyle and wanting people to walk and bike more around the community.
I'd like to add a little bit to that too.
Yeah.
If we're gonna encourage biking, in addition to the walking and the sidewalks, we need something to help with securing them. So my son was gung ho about buying an electric bike. Husband does not want him to drive just yet. But then our concern was he wanted to take it on the bus to take it to the mall. Where is he gonna secure that so that it doesn't get stolen? Those things are super expensive. So have you guys looked at all into bike lockers or some type of apparatus where people can lock up their mode of transportation to encourage people to get out there and do more of that?
So I don't know if specifically if we've looked into bike lockers, but we do, as a part of new development, require like bike stands, people to be able to have an area outside of a business to be able to lock their bike to. I do know that some jurisdictions require bike lockers. And so that's something that, is usually a part of like parking standards. So just like a car parking, we have bicycle parking requirements. And so that's something we could look at in the future as far as requiring,
Yeah,
especially for bigger shopping centers and those kinds of things where people tend to kind of, need those kind of places, maybe, requiring those. But that would be
Yeah.
part of like a development code kind of update thing where we would
Right.
require business to do that.
to see that, just kind of looking at the model that Amazon uses as a partnership with local businesses, how they have the little Amazon lockers where people can go and enter in a code or however to pick up their delivery as opposed to having it dropped off at their house. Is that something that maybe the city can consider partnering with smaller businesses to provide a locker type apparatus? And I mean, it might drive traffic to their business.
Yeah.
And then it's on the business owner to, I don't know, utilize maybe some kind of grant to kind of help them get that going.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion. I think that's, something that, as more people bike, there needs to be more space for them to be able to, lock that up. That's not just out in the rain and,
With the risk of them, having it stolen and then encouraging somebody to go do it is kind of a moot point if that's the biggest concern of.
Yeah, and the barriers to biking, so there's obviously that, but there is also a big part of this is making sure that people are comfortable
Mhm.
biking in the first place.
Yeah,
So a big barrier is like, would you feel confident riding with your child in a bike lane that's on a 35-mile-an-hour road with nothing
Yeah.
separating you but a painted line that's about that wide, right?
True.
And so a big focus of this is really about safety and making sure that when we do have bike lanes, that there's some buffering between the traffic and those kinds of things, because I think we've come a long ways as a community in terms of like having bike lanes and having more bicycle facilities, but we want to kind of even take that to the next level where you're providing additional safety and those kinds of things. So anybody would feel safe, not just the most competent cyclists and, commuting on a day-to-day basis or going to the store or whatever, on a bike.
agreed.
So let's get into the goals, which I think, talk a little bit to that, which would be goal number 1, and actually probably goal number 2, safety and quality of life as well. So the way that the transportation goals are, they're really set up right around the community priorities that I started with. So it actually, we go into, once we get to goal 3, we're talking about housing. Goal number 4 is around environmental issues. Goal number 5 is around the identity thing that I talked about and amenities and recreation. And then number 6 is around economic development. So you can see that those goals are tied in directly with the community priorities. If I was to go back to the beginning of the presentation, if I was to go back to the beginning of the presentation, those 6 transportation goals would align directly with those 6 community priorities. Any questions, comments on transportation before I move on? All right, we made it. Last one. Utilities. Utilities is a required element. A little bit about the utilities element here. It is a little bit more technical in nature. There's really it's to support 2 different things, which is our municipal utilities and then also private utilities. So for municipal utilities, that's things like water, wastewater, stormwater, et cetera. Those all have their own individual plans associated with them. And so this is really connecting those plans to our overall comprehensive plan. It is also coordinating with our private utilities. So things like electrical, natural gas, cable, telephone. So we are required to be coordinated and consistent with things like Comcast and Puget Sound Energy and those folks as well. Not a lot of changes in the updated utilities elements. So these are, most of them are actually from our 2016 plan. We did remove some overlapping policies. We kind of downsized a little bit of it, but in doing that, there are some things that were just no longer a priority from the city's end. So I wanted just to mention a couple of those. We used to have a water line leak detection program. We were losing a lot of water through water line leakage, and that program has now been completed. We're under an acceptable amount of leaks in our water system. And then water rights associated with the Olympia Brewery. So that's been completed as well. So a couple of goals that I was gonna show you here was increasing the efficiency of water and wastewater infrastructure. And especially, well, these policies, which I put up on the screen here, go back to some earlier comments about greenhouse gas emission reductions. So number 9A is about when we do upgrades to our municipal systems like water and sewer, that we prioritize those that give us the biggest bang for our buck in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions. And then policy 9B is related to city utility facilities and how we encourage conservation of energy and things like pumping stations and those kinds of things. And then goal 10 is around land for utilities. And this is making sure that we're coordinating regionally around kind of a new technology, which is called battery energy storage facilities. And I don't know if any of you have heard of these, but essentially they are big areas of batteries that take energy off the grid in times of low demand and then put from those batteries back onto the grid in times of high demand, that energy. And those, the siting of that is really important because these things, they're somewhat a new technology and they can be complex, especially from a land use perspective in terms of there's fire requirements and those kinds of things. They need to be sited in a way that are, not next to residents and schools. And so we're actually working regionally to develop regulations for where those should go in our community. I think there's one going in an unincorporated Thurston County at this point, out in rural Thurston County, but none that we've received application for before. So let's just wrap this up. I'll be happy to answer any questions about anything that you've heard, but just some discussion questions that I don't think you need these. I think you've done a very good job. Let me know if there's anything here additional that you would like to go through. And then next steps. So as I mentioned,
Looks like John's got a hand up.
Yeah, so I'll just talk about next steps and then.
John?
Okay.
John?
So for things that might be missing, I didn't see anything that maybe could be informed by our equity heat map that is going to be coming here in the next however long, certainly in the next 20 years. And so I want to make sure that we incorporate that language into this plan to help us go forward with this, if that makes sense.
I think Commissioner Hegland, correct me if I'm wrong, you're referencing the equity map, the tool that we're working on currently. I know you all have seen a draft. I know Ryan's participated in helping us create the draft as well. So just to make sure that, I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page. Is that correct, Commissioner Hedgewood?
It is.
Yeah, and another advantage of a website is being able to just link directly to the equity map, right? And be able to show, exactly, telling the story and then having that represented in the map is gonna be a powerful tool.
And I think Commissioner Hedgewood, just to add on to what Ryan was saying of having that connectivity, so when it comes down to actually implementing those policies, that is one of the tools in the tool belt for the city, so they could take a look at. So if it was something about, I'll just use the example of improving transportation systems, you could actually take a look at that map and look at the accessibility feature and maybe think about designing some programs with that data in mind amongst other data.
Yes, thank you for capturing that, Jen.
Ron, I had a utilities question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Any plans in the next 10 or 20 years to underground utilities?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The council actually brought that one up as well. That's been at least a couple council members' priority. So, with all new development is required to underground except for the highest kind of voltage lines around the community. There's safety and risk issues associated with undergrounding those. But if for the large part, if you were to do a new development, whether it be commercial or residential, you have to underground that as a part of it, which means, well, what's left? Well, it's all kind of older development that doesn't have the infrastructure undergrounded, and it's a high cost to the utility that we all would have to pay as utility payers to pay for the cost of undergrounding that. So at this point, there are some mechanisms that if you were to develop or redevelop, that you would have to underground that. But until you do that, it's basically allowed to continue above ground in older developments. And, at this point, Puget Sound Energy doesn't have the resources or financial resources to be able to do as much undergrounding as they would like. So it's essentially going to continue until somebody does a new development in that certain area that would require undergrounding.
So a strong wind come through, blow over a tree, knock down a line, blacken an entire neighborhood. So we just gotta put up with that in where it exists now.
Move to a brand new neighborhood.
Yeah, move to
Brand new
move to a new
neighborhood.
neighborhood where everything's underground. I mean, I don't live in a new neighborhood. I live in a neighborhood that was developed probably late '70s, early '80s, but they, for whatever reason, I don't think they were probably required to, but they undergrounded it. And I'm very appreciative because, like, that it's not your neighborhood's fault that the power's out. And then once it's back, it's like, well, everybody's up at the same time. It's not these individual service lines and those kinds of things that can go out. That I think that's where you get these very prolonged periods where you maybe have a customer or two or three that are out that isn't the highest priority for the utility to turn back on. And so, from a resilience standpoint, like what we've been talking about tonight, that can be a real issue, especially if you are, fully electric, and don't have any other options. You could be out of power for a significant amount of time if it's above ground, in an area with relatively few customers. So it's a priority of the city to require PSC to do that or require developers to do that when you have new development. But unfortunately, we don't have the authority just to go tell PSC to underground everything, because it would greatly impact the ratepayers because they'd have to pay the cost to do that.
And I got one
They've been doing it for a long
transportation
time.
question.
My neighborhood's 35 years old.
Yeah.
No.
But it's the right of way stuff that gets us,
Mm,
the lines in the air and
Yeah.
boxes and
Yeah.
transformers, yeah.
Yep.
trees.
But I just didn't know what was being talked about, a plan for the future.
Yeah, and so there are actually goals and policies in that utilities element that talks about coordination with PSE for undergrounding, but it's really related to new development
Yeah.
or redevelopment.
Yeah, and so rest of us just out in the cold or in the dark. So when a car hit a tree, the tree knocks over the big line and
Yes.
Yeah.
the whole grid is gone, but, okay, you answered my question, thank you.
And then I had transportation issues only because I used to work out in JBLM, and one of the jobs that I did as admin was the van pool and rideshare program. I know we focus a lot on within the city of Lacey, traffic, but I think it's a good idea to also focus, because aside from Pierce County and DuPont, we're gonna be the next place that most military members are going to look at living. And so we have to stop and we have to talk about traffic outside of here, because that's a big, heavy thing. I mean, yes, if we're wanting to encourage those people to come back and live here, we need to see them where they're at in the meantime. And so being able to connect them from this county to that county, seeing as though the city of Lacey and unincorporated Thurston County is a next step. What are some things that we can think about doing as far as getting them connected and also being the bridge to the south and the north? What's happening as far as I think we were talking a little bit about the natural disaster plans, but when we have those big accidents and people want to come down Martin and Marvin Way, and we've got those backups, I can see that being an issue with that part of the plan that you were discussing, as well as bike and walking safety, because now those thoroughways on Pacific, on Martin, and I can see if they know how to go around the,
Squam.
yeah, then the Squally area, the back of Carpenter and all of that, those thoroughways get very heavily flooded, especially on those Memorial Weekend Sundays coming back from Portland type of area. We get bombarded there. So what are some of the plans to kind of alleviate?
So what I would point you to is the regional transportation plan. So we have like jurisdiction-specific transportation plans, but we also have across the whole Thurston region, a regional transportation plan. So I'd point you at that, which basically talks more about how we connect between communities. So how Olympia connects to Lacey and how Olympia connects to Tumwater, you know, how we connect through each other's jurisdictions. So within this plan, we're very focused on what's only within our kind of municipal boundaries, but we have other plans that tell us how we do planning across jurisdictions. And then it also talks about how we plan for transportation to other areas, Pierce County, Lewis County, Mason County, you know, those kinds of things as well. So I'd point you towards that regional transportation plan. And I think one of the highest priorities in that regional transportation plan is the I-5 widening Nisqually Bridge replacement, which is, you know, something that, you know, for the longest time, you know, WashDOT or the federal government didn't really give us much love down here in this area. They were really focused on, especially Tacoma, for a couple decades. And that, you know, I think you've been through Tacoma lately, you probably could think, well, Tacoma's a lot better than it used to be.
A little bit. I was there this morning.
Well, what about Thurston County? You know, they've kind of neglected our area as
And
far
I
as.
understand why. I mean, we've got the reservation for the natives, and then we also have the military reservation. So there's
Right.
gotta be some kind of bypass that needs to be looked at. Is that something that's gonna be something that somebody can point and click at when they're looking at that?
The regional transportation plan, I don't know exactly off the top of my head. That's through Thurston Regional Planning Council. So if you're interested, that's kind of the search terms that I would use: regional transportation plan, Thurston Regional Planning Council. And be able to see, you know, in there exactly what that is. And there's probably as well a Washington State Department of Transportation site on the improvements to the Interstate 5.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest to put maybe links to those, because if you're wanting to even taking a look at military people that may be looking at getting stationed here and may want to come live in the city of Lacey, that would be something that they would be looking at wherever they're at. You know, they might be in Texas looking to PCS here next year. They know they're gonna come here. They're gonna be looking hopefully ahead of time to plan where they're going to live at. And if we want to entice them to come to Thurston County, to Lacey and specifically, then we need to have that information there, because they're not gonna know. They're gonna think, oh, well, it's only like 20 miles. How bad can traffic be? And then they're gonna get here and get the shock of the lifetime. So I think something like that, also taking a look at our, oh gosh, registration fees is also another bonus that I think that we can also capitalize on, because anytime you look anything above here, registration fees on registering their car is astronomical. And, you know, I think that's a perk that we can probably capitalize on.
But you know, the reason why that is because they're in the Sound Transit.
Yes.
You know, district. So you know.
And why we gotta kind of look at transportation, how can we do that smartly so that in the future, when we can do that, we don't get what they have up there, because that's gonna discourage a lot of people from staying here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Part of it too is that, we're not a part of the Sound Transit Taxing Authority, which means that like, people ask quite often about like, when is light rail coming to Thurston County? Well,
Or do we even want that?
it's not.
Yeah, and I
Not
don't think-
anytime soon, because we would have to, we would have to be a part of that taxing district that would
Yes.
then, send the infrastructure down our way. And so, while probably the likely scenario could be that we would use the I-5 right away to be able to do that, the logistical issues associated with, crossing the Nisqually, Valley and then also being part of a different taxing district that would, require all of us to pay a lot more to be able to do that
It's
would
like,
be.
what can we do that's smarter that they haven't thought of, So that'd be interesting.
I think, Brian, maybe just to add on to your comment too about the regional, transit planning.
Yeah.
Is there are some policies aimed, I think, at working with our, transportation partners, whether at local, regional, or state level, and encouraging public transit. And then it also feeds back into that vehicle mile travel reduction.
Mhm.
And so there are a couple of draft policies, I think, aimed at, some of the concepts we've talked about, just in a kind of a broader sense, not necessarily specific to, trips between here and Joint Base Lewis McChord.
True. And then you also have to think about too, our disability community. There is nothing there for them. I have looked, and because I have a child that has a disability who works out in Pierce County on JBLM, there are no things out there for him. And I'm thinking me and their dad are not going to be around for the rest of his life. We're hopefully gonna go before him. And so we want him to be independent, and it's one of the things that is stopping him from moving out of the house, which we want him to be more independent. But we have to find ways to get him back and forth to work. There is nothing out there for somebody with a disability to allow them to be even more independent, safely independent, because they are on top of all of that, they're on SSI, which means that they can't work a full-time job. So they have to stay within the parameters of how many hours a month that they can work. And rideshare doesn't work for that. Pool does not work for that for my specific situation, because his hours and days change on a weekly basis. So what do we do for somebody that's like that?
Yeah.
That's super hard. And I didn't realize until just couple of years ago that there's nothing out there. I looked at Dial-a-Lift, I looked at all the things, and there's nothing with Pierce Transit, or there's Intercity Transit, which I worked with for years. They know who I am from working out on the base. So we've got to find something.
Any other, your hand,
I have
another
one quick
question?
question, just, did city employees get free bus tickets and commute reduction program, do you?
Yeah, so everybody that wants to ride an intercity transit bus, it's fare free.
That's right.
So, yeah, we do have a commute trip reduction plan, which the council actually just updated. They adopted weeks ago or a week ago. Those are for the larger employers in the community. So I think the threshold is 100 or more employees. So every large employer in Thurston County has commute trip reduction plan. So yeah, we have had that for probably better part of 30 years here.
Well, Ryan, thank you very much for your half hour.
I ran through the gamut, sorry.
Fantastic conversation. I appreciate the feedback as always, and thanks for having me. I just wanted to just really briefly say, we're gonna release these goals and policies to the community July 1st, which is gonna be open for feedback through our website, which is envisiontomorrowlacy.org. And so we'll make sure that you all get a copy of that. Get a link to it so you can take a look at it as well. From there, we're going to be then going through our public hearing process and eventually getting it to the city council, like I mentioned, hopefully by the end of this year. So really appreciate the feedback that you provided this step, in addition to the feedback you previously provided. And if you do have anything additional, feel free to get a hold of me, or through Shannon, you can get a hold of me. Happy to take any feedback. This is still a work in progress. This is not done by any means. So happy to take any additional feedback.
Do you think it will be done when did?
Well, the final plan is required to be adopted by December 31st. So that's kind of our ultimate deadline, but we're taking community feedback through the summer on the draft goals and policies. So, we'd be happy to take feedback from any of you through the summer.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yep.
And thank you, Jenny, for so patiently waiting. We'll start on the agenda. So our next item is the Lacey Metropolitan Park District presentation. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. So I'm Jenny Wilson. I'm a parks planner in the Lacey Parks Culture and Recreation Department. And I'm here tonight to share some information about the Lacey Metropolitan Park District, also known as MPD, going forward to save some time. So it's a ballot measure that's going to be on the August ballot. It is for registered voters in Lacey city limits. And they will be deciding on whether or not to vote to create a Metropolitan Park District. So I'm here to share some information about our department, facts about the MPD and potential projects. So I'm kind of doing a little bit of a roadshow, going out to all the boards and commissions. Obviously, you're important people in our community and want to make sure that you have very factual information and most up-to-date information. So thank you so much. We have some flyers that we are sending out to the community in every way we can. But tonight I'm gonna go through a little PowerPoint here. Yeah. So I'm gonna start talking about our vision for our department. I know you've been through our comprehensive plan, so I know you've probably seen this, but it's to create exceptional events, experiences, environments that delight, educate, and inspire the human spirit, connecting people to each other and to the past, building a strong and healthy community. So our department, just an overview, we have 40 full-time staff. And that includes 18 staff within the Parks, Culture, and Recreation Department, and then 22 in the Public Works Department. And the Public Works Department are the ones that oversee parks maintenance. And we have 2 boards. We have the Parks, Culture, and Recreation Board, and then we also have the Historical Commission. The operating budget for our department is about 10.4 million a year. Little overview of the parks in general. We have a little bit over 1,200 acres of park property. I think some people might be surprised to learn that a lot of our park property is still undeveloped or partially developed. So about 59% or 750 acres. We have 22 developed parks and 4 trails and 9 undeveloped parks total. So a little background on the current funding of Lacey Parks. Here's a breakdown of how it's funded. So to operate all of our parks, programs, and facilities, the majority of funding comes from the city's general fund, about 74%. The next highest funding source is from our programs and rental fees. And then the Public Facilities District sales tax is a portion of state sales tax that the city receives specifically for the Regional Athletic Complex, or RAC, which I'll now refer to it as that. And then we also receive lodging tax dollars, primarily for the RAC, the museum, and some of our special events. So an overview of our programs and events. We offer about 1,000 classes a year. We generate about 350,000 hours of recreation. So a lot of fun is happening in our department. And then we serve over 90,000 participants in classes and events, and those are all the different program areas. We also have lots of partnerships with businesses and community organizations, North Thurston Public Schools, Senior Services for South Sound, and many others that allow us to offer programs and events. So one thing that we hear quite often from our community is how wonderful our parks are. And so before we get into too much about the Metropolitan Park District, I think it's important to share how what actually goes into all the work and now all the hours that go into keeping our parks well maintained and beautiful. So this is some staff hours from our Parks Maintenance Department. And it just goes into how much work goes into the janitorial and upkeep of a park. So the over 15,000 hours for just janitorial and park cleanup. And obviously there's lots of other categories, but I won't go into those. So an MPD would fund expanded maintenance, including the maintenance of new facilities.
How many people do you have on your janitorial team?
I don't know that we have specific janitorial team. I think everybody does a little bit of everything.
Okay.
And we also have quite a few seasonal staff that come in during certain, summer season when it gets a little bit busier too.
Got it, yes.
And now getting into the Lacey Metropolitan Park District. So this is going to be on the August 5th ballot, as I've mentioned, and it's known as Proposition 1. And it is going to create the Metropolitan Park District. It'll provide ongoing funding to maintain, operate, and improve parks, trails, and recreation facilities. It will establish the MPD boundaries as Lacey city limits and also establish that it'll be governed by the Lacey City Council. It'll also authorize the tax rate of up to a maximum of 45 cents per 1,000 of assessed property value. So MPDs are junior property taxing districts authorized by state law. And the purpose of Lacey MPD is to create new park features and facilities, operate those facilities, and expand maintenance and programs. An MPD provides ongoing dedicated funding for new park features that may otherwise take longer to complete or may not occur. And here's a chart. It's also in the flyer that you have, but it gives an overview of what property owners could potentially expect to pay for an MPD. So as an example, an owner with an assessed value of 500,000 would pay $225 per year or $18.75 per month. And with that, the MPD would generate about $5.9 million per year. And the intent would be to supplement, not replace, existing parks and recreation funding. So Lacey City Council, as I mentioned, would serve as the MPD board and approve the budget. And as I mentioned previously, we have the Parks, Culture, and Recreation Board and Historical Commission. They would remain and provide recommendations to the MPD board, Lacey City Council. So there's two main priorities for the MPD. There's new park features and expanded maintenance. So for new park features, spray parks and other water play features, trails, open space access, indoor playgrounds, sports fields, pickleball playgrounds, pump tracks, skate features, disc golf, community gardens, and food forests. And then for the expanded maintenance, again, this is keeping the parks safe and functional with routine service and repairs, safety inspections, cleaning, lighting, landscaping, and seasonal inspections. So those are kind of our broad categories. I'm going to share some details about the projects that are on the flyer and that are important and came out of our Lacey Parks Culture and Comprehensive Plan. But before I do, I just want to share a little bit about the process that we use to identify the projects and the priorities. So over the last several years, we've done quite a bit of community outreach and gathered over 8,700 community comments and survey results related to the future of parks, culture, and recreation. So here's an overview of the process that we've gone through over the last several years and kind of culminated with the completion of the Parks, Culture, and Recreation Comp Plan. So a significant takeaway in that comprehensive plan was that a stable funding source was needed to meet the community needs. There was a lot of projects, a lot of goals that we wanted to accomplish in that plan. And then in 2024, City Council formed the Parks Improvement Funding Work Group, which was a group of 15 community members who did a deep dive on projects, funding, and ultimately recommended pursuing the Metropolitan Park District as a way to find that stable funding source. And just a thank you to Commissioner Hedgewood, who was on one of those 15 members who was very helpful during that time. So. And then now getting into some of the potential projects that the MPD would fund. So here's a map showing the various potential project locations. So these projects were requested by the community and identified in our Lacey Parks Culture and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. So I'm going to share a little bit about each project. So the first one is Greg Cuyo Park. Sounds like some of you are already familiar with that one. So we're really excited. We're currently under construction of phase 1. And this is long-awaited access to 139 acres of the 537 acres total. So I've circled on there the 137 acres that we're currently developing, but as you can see, there's quite a bit that's still has some potential for us. So the first phase is going to include a large inclusive playground, picnic shelter, about 2 miles of trails, disc golf course, and parking. So the next phase is not funded, but could be funded by the MPD. And that plans for that second phase include adding additional trails, a dog park, and or zip line to the playground, and then also restrooms. So between 2002 and 2011, the city of Lacey acquired adjacent park properties, all these properties to make up the Greg Cuyo Park and greenways. It's a really great example of how projects can take decades to secure property, get grant funding, and slowly save to fund the project. So we're excited to be at the development phase because it's one of the only parks north of I-5. And so we're providing access in a park to a really underserved area of our community. Another big project that we have on our list is the Virgil S. Clarkson Senior Center. There's 2 significant needs at this site. And due to overcrowding, really it's the expansion of the facility and then also additional parking. If you've been there, it's often full, overflow parking is necessary. And you can kind of see on this map, the overflow parking is not very close to the location of the senior center. So seniors often with mobility constraints are tasked with taking a long walk, which is not ideal. So we'd really like to expand parking and the actual center. We have a great partnership. I mentioned partnerships before, and we have a really great partnership with Senior Services for South Sound. They manage the programs and the site, and we are responsible for the facility and maintenance of the center. Another project is Brooks Park. Is anyone familiar with Brooks Park here? No, nobody ever is. So Brooks Park is a great little site. It's a little 1 acre park site off of College Street. And that's a picture of it. It's an open green space area. It has a small gravel parking lot. And it's we'd really like to develop it and focus on adding amenities like a small playground. This is a great opportunity for us to provide amenities in a low income area. It's great walkability right off of College Street, serves a lot of apartments. And so we'd love to add some amenities there.
What's the cross street for that?
15th Avenue.
15th,
Yep.
okay.
The next, we have 2 lake projects on our list, Long Lake Park and Wanchers Park. Wanchers Park, which is on Hicks Lake. In 2002, the city acquired this little sliver of property right next to Long Lake. It's beautiful piece of property, wooded. It has a lot of waterfront access, and we'd like to make it accessible to the public. And in addition, our current Long Lake Park site is in need of some improvements, addressing the beach slope and some erosion of the shoreline. And this is the city's only swimming beach, so it's heavily used. So getting some additional expansion to it would be really great for the community.
The building in the middle.
Oh, that is a house. And so that also needs to be addressed. So it's basically a small home, so when we acquired it, there was a house on there.
Somebody's currently living,
No,
it's not
nope,
uninhibited.
It's
Okay.
not, yeah, it's boarded up right now, so. And then the other waterfront property that I don't have a photo of is Wanchers Park, but it's beachfront access on Hicks Lake. Has a lot of potential. We'd love to do some more planning for that site, determine some amenities there. It's wooded, there'd be great trails that we'd like to expand. And also fishing, we'd like to make some fishing opportunities.
It was like 6 parking
Right,
spots.
there is a total of 6 parking spots at Wanchers Park, so it's not exactly a huge hub, but on a hot day, people do go there, and so we'd like to definitely make it more accessible.
And where is that one?
It's on Hicks Lake.
Oh, Hicks Lake.
It's,
Off of Carpenter?
yep, not
No.
off of Ruddle and
Ruddle.
Hicks.
Okay.
Yeah, like behind the post office type area, like way back, yeah.
Yeah, yep, yeah. I can pull it up on a map. I can show.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
The one photo I didn't bring.
It is off of Hicks Lake and Ruddle,
Yep.
so.
It's another one, it's
Couple
another one
blocks over
that's
from Ruddle. Ruddle
tucked-
runs that
tucked
way.
away.
Hicks Lake Road runs that way.
And then we have Rainier Vista Park. So big plans for Rainier Vista Park, including 4 new pickleball courts, a spray park, and outdoor table tennis or ping pong, depending on what term you like to use. So this is a really big community park. So we'd like to add some additional amenities here. And then Meridian Park, again, this is a really popular park and it's unfinished and it needs additional planning to determine possible amenities like pickleball, skate features, pump track, or a spray park. The long-term plan has been to include a multi-purpose sports field that could accommodate soccer and softball, baseball fields. We'd like to see that added because this is one of the only parks north of I-5 and there is a shortage of sports fields. And then another project this is a priority, would be to work with partners, particularly North Thurston Public Schools, to add 2 features at the Young Child and Family Center site. And this would be adding an indoor playground and spray park. Our goal is to be able to add to the exciting synergy that's happening at this site. So the Young Child and Family Center site, in case you're not aware, is a school district project, and they're providing early learning and recreation activities for preschoolers and their families. And then we also have another spray park that we'd like to add in South Lacey. The exact location for this has not been identified, but we did hear from community members when we were doing our comprehensive plan that 1, 2, 3 spray parks was not enough. We need to add some more. So and you know, Lacey's pretty spread out. So in order to hit all the areas, we need to spread them out. So some additional planning obviously needs to be done to determine the location. And now I'm going to start talking about some, we could talk about really exciting new things, but it's important to talk about some of our existing sites that need some maintenance and replacement projects. And so the Regional Athletic Complex, we have some replacement needs identified. One thing that I find interesting is that the Regional Athletic Complex, when we did our comprehensive plan update, it was selected as the most visited park in our system. I don't know if I'm surprised by that. And so it's an amazing sports facility, but it and that sports facility creates an economic impact of about $15 million a year. It's equally important, as mentioned, that it's a community park. You know, it's got playgrounds, the walking trails are highly used. So it's really important to the community members for that reason. And so maintaining it needs to be a priority for those people that frequently use it. And also just keeping the athletic fields in premier condition to attract tournaments. So one of the things that's really interesting is that the RAC is not one of our oldest playgrounds, but they are the most heavily used because it is such a popular site, and they have degraded pretty rapidly, more than other sites. So while they're not the oldest in our inventory, those playgrounds do need to be replaced in the next few years. I think everybody thinks of the RAC as like our new place, right? And it is fairly new, but it still needs some replacements too. And next we have Homan Park, which is off of Carpenter Road. And one of the projects here is that the picnic area needs to be renovated. The asphalt's cracking, and there's two beautiful large Douglas fir trees in that picnic area. I've got one of them pictured here where you can see the trees grown so large that it's getting girdled, and it'll eventually die if we don't replace the picnic area and get that asphalt replaced. And then we have Lake Point Park, a neighborhood park. Again, tennis and basketball courts have some pretty significant cracking, so that needs to be replaced. And similarly, there's a common theme of asphalt cracking where Wonderwood Park, we have some trails that are, we think they might be as old as the park was installed. We're not entirely sure of the age, but some pretty significant cracking in the asphalt that needs to be updated. And then we have, in the next few years, many playgrounds are due for replacement, including Rainier Vista, Thornberry, and Huntemer Park. So I think some folks might be surprised to learn about those too. They're kind of our newer parks. So for example, Rainier Vista is 21 years old. So I still think of it as a new park, but and the consequences of having playgrounds that are that old is they're out of warranty, it's expensive when things break and we have to repair them, and replacement parts are not always available. So it's really in everyone's best interest that we keep things on a regular replacement. And then just a little bit information about our previous park investments. In 2002, Lacey voters approved a parks bond issue for almost $10 million. And it included, it funded park improvement projects at many of the park sites listed here. Some of that bond debt will retire in 2003 and more will retire in 2026. So what's important here is that, as we just learned from the potential projects, many of those playgrounds are now or will soon be in need of replacement. So this kind of illustrates the challenge of a bond, which is that there's no ongoing maintenance funding. And then just a quick review of the significant funding options for city parks departments. There's our current funding, which is primarily through the general fund, which competes with other city services. Many projects may take longer to complete or may not occur. And there's limited ability to expand maintenance and programs. We just talked a little bit about bonds, and then the Metropolitan Park District option, which is ongoing funding. There's no end date. It's flexible with funding for improvements, acquisitions, maintenance, and operations for parks. And then it's dedicated to parks funding.
And that's through property owners of the city of Lacey, or does that include unincorporated?
It would just be, there are options where you can do it different ways, but in this scenario, that's only for Lacey City city of Lacey.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Just before we get into questions, maybe just to kind of, before we get what you all are asking or want some more information about, I just want to make sure that we reiterate that Jenny's here to provide information only on this topic. And that we can't use any city resources to suppress or express support or opposition to any ballot measures. So the questions that we're here to answer, it's information only.
Oh,
Any questions?
John?
Okay, John, I'm sorry, I had stopped looking up.
No worries, Vice Chair. Jenny, thank you for that presentation. Love it. I would like to add, I guess, well, one's an add, one's a question. One thing I would like to add is that some of the like crumbling infrastructure that Jenny mentioned also represents a liability issue for the city, or I guess I should say more particularly a potential liability issue for the city. Because of its current states, it's either no longer serviceable or rapidly approaching that state. And so replacing the infrastructure or at minimum removing it should be a priority just from a liability aspect and like potential costs involved with that. And then Jenny, perhaps I missed it, but I did not see anything about the, what is it, the community center or the community museum / center place that's in the current site of the train depot piece currently that I know is also on our listed proposal, our project proposals for the work group.
right. Yeah. So there are some, that project is still in our goals. It's still in our comprehensive plan, and we are working on funding, looking for grants and some funding options. So it's still there. It's just more of a long-term.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, on my order of priorities for the city, it was lower on the list for several reasons, least of which being the cost. It was not an inexpensive undertaking for sure. Although we are, I think, in like phase 1B or D or whatever it is of that site currently with the renovated parking. If I recall correctly, it's been a hot minute, but also to the, I guess, larger commission here, I obviously was the Commission on Equities liaison to the Parks work group and Parks Improvement Funding work group, excuse me. I will say that despite all the work that we've done, it was great to represent our commission on this work group and bring an equity lens to our parks funding. And I would tell you that I still came to the same conclusion that the rest of the work group did with, if I recall, it was unanimous consent on the creation of a Metro Parks District. And it's and how necessary it is for us to not only carry out our current mission as, you know, having one of the most comprehensive municipal park systems in the state, but then also, of course, funding our future endeavors and proposed projects to make sure that we have a more equitable and accessible park system in our city.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, for your representation of the commission.
Yeah.
It was my pleasure.
Any questions?
And then spray parks versus like water pools. That decision.
Yeah, so we did hear from the community that they want pool. And it's still on our list. We're working with partners and hoping that can come to fruition too. But there's some pieces that need to come together with that too for grant funding. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that what we put on our flyer and what we put out there is.
As a non-swimmer, I appreciate the spray, running through the little spray park
Well,
anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, the spray parks are very low cost, no cost, very accessible, so.
And a dual purpose on like really hot summer days too,
Right.
so yeah,
Great,
I'm
great.
excited about
Yep.
those.
But the Young Child and Family Center could be a site where a pool could be an option, that there are discussions, but it's more discussions need to happen. We could put it out to the community as this is gonna happen with NPD funding.
So who takes the lead on pushing this proposition? Is there a committee? Is there?
So again, the city has to remain neutral. We can provide information.
I know.
And we can't use any city resources, including this facility, for expressing support or opposition to any type of ballot measure.
I know. So I know when the school district has levies and bonds on the ballot, there's a citizen group pushing it, advertising it, you know. So is there any entity that's pushing Proposition 1 for this
Or at
on
least giving
behalf?
informationals,
Huh?
or at least giving informationals for
Yeah,
people
it's,
who may
so
be unaware.
there could very well be community members out there, but again, the city's position is that we are
Can't.
neutral and we cannot use city resources.
Oh, I
Such as
understand
this
that about the
meeting
city, but I'm
itself.
asking
About this.
who
That's-
is pushing?
And that is from the city, and again, that's just for informational purposes only.
So there's no entity that's, you know, out there speaking to Rotary and Kiwanis and that kind of stuff, encouraging the community to vote yes on Proposition 1.
Can't use city facilities for something like that, but there may be groups out there. But what Jenny is absolutely doing is providing information to the community, and that includes going out for presentations across different community groups to provide information on the topic. Yes.
Sound like the answer is no. No, aside from the city, I'm not being, you
No
know,
citizens have come
yeah,
forth.
I'm just
Mm-hmm.
realizing other financial propositions that come before the community. There's usually an advocacy group aside from the governmental unit that can't do it. That's out there pushing people and encouraging a vote of yes on the issue for the ballot. So it doesn't sound like there is anybody.
Again, the city's role is to remain neutral, and certainly
Gotcha.
community members can do their own research, but the city is neutral on the topic.
So like that citizens group that came together and did all the input, you know.
Or is there like a board or
Okay.
community boards where this information is going out?
Yeah, this is a city produced flyer and we have a communications plan and our intention is to mail, the city will mail this
Mhm.
because this is just factual information. So this will be mailed to voters in Lacey.
Yeah, cause I mean, this would be good, cause it gives you the election date, it gives you, you know, the informational piece. But yeah, I think.
But
Commissioners, do you have any, I guess, questions specifically
Yeah,
on
yeah.
projects or the structure you could answer?
well, I compliment you on the brochure. It's very attractive and attracts your eyes and hopefully,
This was Shannon and her team, the communications
Yeah.
team that
It's
did
out
this,
there.
but
Love it.
yeah.
There's a lot of good information.
yes, very factual information.
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah,
and your
thank
time.
you for having me and listening. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
So I had asked her to bring me some of the flyers and the brochure, but if any of you would like her to provide you with some so that in your places of business or whatever, you know, I'm sure they'll be more than willing to provide you with some,
Absolutely. We have
get all the help we can get and
a bunch of these printed. We'll have them at events and so
Right.
if you'd like some, I'd certainly be able to get you some.
and when people ask about Proposition 1, what's this all about? So now we know. And, you know, we can encourage people to vote yes on Proposition 1.
So again, gotta shut this conversation down. It's just for informational only purposes.
No more than that. Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
Yes, thank you so much for
No
having me.
more. That takes us then to Veronica, the Thurston Forward, the DI Summit.
Yeah, well, we're very happy to, actually, we are 95% done with the PowerPoint presentation. We'll have it ready for the next meeting. It's pretty much ready. We have the last meeting on Friday to review the last results. We have all the data already from the participants, but we have to collect data from the organizers about what worked, didn't work and all that, so. But while it was super successful, I also want to hear from you. But we gathered some information from the surveys that people responded. Overall, we had 200, a little over 200 confirmations. We had about 127 participants. Some of them didn't register, so we don't have like the exact number, but it's about 127. The event was very successful. The environment, the atmosphere was of trust and joy and collaboration. It was like a very positive vibe. I enjoyed that very much. It felt like a happy place. We had Erin Jones was the keynote speaker, as most of you know. It was the first portion of the day. It was the youth panel presentation led by Erin. I think that set the tone for the rest of the event in a very positive way. The presentation from the youth was, I'm sure the ones who attended will agree with me, very courageous, very inspirational, there was a lot of trust. They were very open. They were very exposed. And so it was very, very interesting. We had 7 goals for the summit. So we will have all these on a PowerPoint, but I will read them to you because I think we did achieve all of them. Build understanding of the diversity work, strengthen community relations, encourage collaborative action, enhance inclusive communication, uplift community voices, support personal and collective growth, and promote mutual aid and care, sorry. So we were encouraging throughout the day to the participants to accomplish these goals. There's 4 key takeaways that we were able to identify from the survey results or answers. One is that it was overwhelmingly positive feedback on the event purpose, the speakers, and the content. The other one was the attendees felt inspired, connected, and ready to take action. The third takeaway, youth presenters and intergenerational dialogue were highly praised. And the last one, strong interest in future collaboration, volunteering, and sponsorship, which is very, very important. Actually, well, I'm gonna jump a little bit, but we already secured the venue for next year. It's again gonna be the Lacey campus at SPSCC. And the next year's date is April 8th. That also has been defined, April 8th. There's this, from the summary of the surveys, we were able to identify that the belief on DIB work was reaffirmed. There was like 100% of the people who answered the surveys agreed with that. Likelihood to recommend the event was very high, about 95%. Plan to follow up with attendees. This was something that we encouraged a lot because we wanted people because there was a lot of networking and people were meeting new people. So we were encouraging to keep in touch. So a lot of people committed to continue with that, like 87% of that. We will have a graph bar. We already have it, but we will present it next meeting. Also willingness to volunteer next year. We had a lot of volunteers to help us for next year who were signed in our sheet, and interested in presenting next year also. We have a lot of interest for speakers for next year. So that's gonna be a good challenge to have. And also, I just mentioned organizational interest in sponsorship for next year. Some organizations expressed their interest. I would like to hear from you about the structure of the event. Shannon, for your information, there was the conferences, the top table show, and then in the afternoon, there was like more workshops, individual sessions besides the keynote. So I think the venue was very, very good. We were able to have the whole campus for 2 days for $400. That was pretty good. And they, seems like we're gonna be able to have the same for next year. We just paid for the time of the people who was working that day in the facility to run the facility. So we're gonna do the same next year. SPSCC was also able to provide us 2 of their employee students who were super helpful that day. They were very dynamic, very proactive, very good attitude. They helped us a lot. So in terms of venue, I would like to get some feedback from you who attended. What do you think of the venue? If you saw any challenges, or I haven't even heard of anything that didn't work, anything that was a challenge or wrong, but I wanted to hear from you as well.
Well, I served on the planning committee and so we went through several months of back and forth to develop the structure, you know, and the goals for it. And we landed on, you know, those goals and the structure there. Everybody got a piece of what they wanted out of it. Those from the committee, there's a wide variety of wants when it comes to having their areas of interest being included in this event. The structure was fine. I enjoy, you know, the setup, the breakout sessions and all, I think worked very well. My only, the only thing I saw that I think can use some work is on those afternoon sessions, those tabletop sessions we had, those small breakouts. I think we need to look at the number of those. I think there were too many. And the room, the way people broke out, you hear each other and stumbling over that type of thing. So if you're gonna do those things, being able to segregate them more and really working hard on having those that are applicable to what we're trying to accomplish there, not just because someone has expertise in an area that they should be a part of the event. You know, just because they have a passion for something that it should be a part of the event. We need to really, I think, really have discussions and focus in on DEIB, what we're trying to accomplish that particular day. And but overall, you know, I'd give it a 95, you know, out of 100. That's one small area. The other thing is I think we should use technology more with the event. I think we can use iPads or whatever for each of the breakout sessions. So we document things electronically and submit when it's done. You know, versus handwritten pads, writing on the wall, those types of things. Let's make it more contemporary.
Okay.
And well, we have a good result from your session specifically, right?
Yes, but
Do you
yeah,
want-
and you know, I wasn't prepared, but you know, we wrote it on
Mhm,
charts and then our intern helped us out. But if I was to do the same thing again, you know, I'd have a scribe who would be putting it on an iPad, which was done. It's just me.
Any other comments?
I was very pleased. Oh, John's hand is up. I see it this time. John?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Geez, a few things. I guess I'll start with, I'm pleased to announce that after going over the numbers with one of the chief organizers, we are actually ahead of budget for this event, which is great. And we have other donations still incoming on top of that. Some of which were people that or groups rather that had not previously committed, but then attended and saw the value in what was provided and wanted to contribute more than materially, I guess, by their presence and their expertise, etc. So that's fantastic. So I'll start there. The other piece to share is, I guess, also what I'll echo what Veronica said, and I had said it in past meetings, that I think starting with the youth panel was a very great way to kind of set the tone for the entire day's worth of events. every youth member up there had something to share that was very important, and varied so much that it gave a lot of people many things to digest. And then just again, I guess the tone of the day was set from that. And so I think future events, we should be striving for a similar setup in that fashion. In some ways, I agree with Commissioner Brown that A, technology, and then B, kind of maybe be more intentional on our groups. I'm not sure which ones that Cliff intended in the morning sessions. I was co-hosting one in the morning, and I could say that we had not only enthusiastic presence, but as well as attendance. I was actually concerned that we were stealing the thunder from other groups that were also having workshops at the time, because our room was actually above capacity. We had to pull desks and chairs from the back of the room and like make last minute chairs and seating arrangements for people that were walking in. And even with that, like the 45 minutes that we were allotted was nowhere near enough time. So I may disagree with Cliff momentarily on that piece, that there was too many or like it was too much or whatever. 45 minutes was nowhere near enough time for us to have all of the discussions that wanted to occur in that room, in that space. And then trying to curate that in the time allotted was a challenge. Not that it wasn't an unwelcome one, but there was a lot of people very passionate about what we were discussing and the material that we were covering. And so even then we still went over time by about 10 minutes. And even then we were still one of the first ones to get to lunch. So it would seem that we weren't all alone in several of those vectors. What was the other thing we were covering here? Oh yes. So technology, format. I think the other thing is that, we want it to be bigger and better. And then of course this time, kind of like the keynote speaker Aaron Jones mentioned, that a lot of that was kind of like preach to the choir, but sometimes what you need is to hear the preacher's sermon as the choir. And that was certainly the moment that felt very shared. Aaron Jones did a great job of kind of reading the room and bringing that home. That is exactly what they're there for. And if that's what we want to go for next time, I don't think we won't have an unreceptive audience. But again, if we're trying to expand that, we of course need to shift our messaging somewhat. And so I guess just kind of being more intentional on where we're going. For a first time event, honestly, and let's be honest, a lot of it was maybe kind of haphazardly put together. I was also on the planning committee, and like Cliff mentioned, there was a lot of back and forth and uncertainties. And like 3 weeks out, we were making a whole lot of decisions day after day. Things just kind of fell into place, and like some of it we just ran with. And like Veronica knows, because she was one of the chief people making it happen for us. Thanks again, Veronica. Like things just kind of happened, and we went with it, rolled with it, made it happen. Whatever, we showed up the day, things happened, and it was fantastic. So just imagine what we could do if we had more time, more resources, more planning, etc. So I don't doubt our ability to do this again, much less do it even better and bigger and more. I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I think everybody here knows what I'm going towards.
If I may add, I agree with John. And one of the things that Veronica knows that I pushed for was to have longer sessions. I was saying, hey, 45 minutes is just not enough. So those afternoon sessions, we were able to have those 45, a few minutes break, and another 45. You could continue, people can move. And I thought that time it worked out perfectly for our breakout, that we had that 90 minutes where we can really, have, in-depth discussions and reach some decisions and conclusions. 45 minutes, hello, introductions, oh, shoot, we're out of time. So that is something that, in the future, looking at, those sessions, some of, like John said, like his was, greatly attended. We need to look at those that were poorly attended as we plan next year to see which ones we, don't, include next time, and those things. Do a critical, evaluation of what, and that will help to, reduce it a little bit and make it more value. I just believe sometimes less is more, and this may be one of those situations where sometimes less is more.
Well, I thought it was really good, having some idea of all the inner workings that were going on and all the fluctuating discussions. I thought it came together quite nicely. I think Denise did a terrific job of pulling it all together, facilitating it. Her skill level just really shined. And it brought a lot to the community for people to actually be able to come together and talk about such a topic. So much had happened at the national level right before the summit that, there was a lot of anticipation. Planning out ahead a year from now, who knows what the climate's gonna be and what the concerns are. But I concur with Cliff about more time for the in-depth workshops. That's where the real meat took place. And there's only so much one can do, any conference or summit in a given amount of time. And other than just throwing all kinds of stuff in there and none of it getting adequate time to really hone down on what really counts, what really matters. But I thought the venue was excellent. Very conveniently located, parking, the whole thing. Great networking.
Yeah.
Great, they come across a lot of names you'd seen, but there the person was. You could stand there with a cup of coffee and really talk. But you all did a great job. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Cliff. A lot of work went into that and it showed because it came across very excellently.
Yeah, I want to just give credit to the municipalities and jurisdictions who provided participants to the session we had. I was really proud of them that they came and they shared and they asked questions. And they really were interested in things that we're doing as Equity Commission here in Lacey. And it became apparent, where we are in our process versus where some of them are. And they were very candid as to where they were and what they're doing. And the goal of collaboration happened. We talked about how we could work together, opportunities to collaborate and work together. And we walked away with a planned follow-up workshop involving the municipalities and jurisdictions, and that's gonna happen in September to be hosted by Thurston County. And so we're really excited and look forward to that, and we'll be working over the summer to bring that together. So the municipalities and jurisdictions can really work together and grow their commissions and groups to come along and be, where we are with our city. They asked for some examples. We gave some examples of some very specific accomplishments we've made here in Lacey. We talked about the relationship we have with the city council and with the city staff. And they were just blown away with that. They were going, oh my God. One person says, oh my goodness. I thought he was upset. He says, you guys have hit a home run with that. They thought it was truly amazing.
Well, there you go. I mean, look at the impact. I mean,
Yes.
just
Mhm.
at the summit, the fallout from it is made a big impact. So kudos. Good
So
job.
there's some positive things ahead with the municipalities and jurisdictions, yes.
Mm.
And the mayor of Tumwater was in our session, she was there. And the president of the city, the county commissioner was there, and other commissioners. It was, Olympia had representatives. It was really an exciting session. The easiest one I've ever facilitated. I just had to kind of stand there.
Mm. Wow.
So congratulations on the two of you that were part of the planning of it. Did a great job.
I think Commissioner Hegwood, as well as our youth council member Kieran Powell,
Oh, yes,
also
Kieran, he was
participated
awesome.
in this.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, Karen did a
Yeah.
great presentation.
I tell you, her leadership, her level of leadership, it just shone through so much as through doing the whole planning and then the participation. I was like, that's our, that's our,
Considering where she jumped
that's
in.
our commissioner. She's awesome.
Our girls,
Yes.
she did a great job.
She did a great
Yeah.
job. I'm so proud of her.
If I may brag on her for a moment, you know, there came a time in the planning committee where we were discussing what the youth panel would look like and what we felt was appropriate. And I'm just like, we don't have any youth members present at this table. Why don't we just ask our youth what they feel is appropriate and what they want to do for the summit? And then it was even Kieran mentioned, like, nobody was even aware that like royalties and honorariums were a thing. The youth that participated in that event were doing it solely because of their passion and telling their stories and being there as a part of this event. Of course, they were still well compensated for their time, as we intended so, but these are very amazing individuals, and Kieran really spearheaded that because I tapped her. And I believe Shannon, I tagged you on that email where I was just like, hey, you know, we're at 2 or 3 commissioners. We only need 3. We don't need 4 because 4 is a quorum. So if we have 3 of them, we're still good. You know, and I asked Kieran if she had the time, and she was meeting up with the person organizing Carol Goss while she was on vacation to get caught up, to be able to give advice and to, you know, tap appropriate people in her community. She really was leading that charge on the youth representation for this. So really appreciate her.
Did any of the other people that were involved have youth involved in their
So
programs?
unfortunately, the city of Olympia's youth council, they
Yes.
couldn't participate because they had other events that they decided to attend. So we didn't have anybody from Olympia, and Tumwater doesn't have.
Yeah, I think they're just standing theirs up, so that might even be something that may inspire them down the
We
line.
had, was
too,
it
'cause-
Rainier or one of the smaller jurisdictions had a youth representative? And
Rochester.
was it Rochester?
Yeah, Rochester, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And the Native American?
network,
That Lynn, someone, there were like 5 youth on the panel, so.
Yeah, no, I think they were of Chinese descendants and I think Korean, I'm not sure, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
and Mexican,
Okay,
because he was Denise's adopted son
okay,
from
yes.
Mexico.
so that's great to see, because I mean, that is the future, and you know, we want.
What we're doing this work for.
Yeah, yeah, and they should have a say and be a part of the planning, and that's great to see.
And for the lunch, we had Asho. They were awesome, very easy to work with, super committed, very supportive. It was also a very good experience working with them. And they're halal, we had a vegan option, like it was all, we had enough food. It was all very, very good.
Nice.
And I think it also helped a lot that it was a free event.
Yes, I like that.
That also was a very, very good decision to do a free. So
Yeah,
thank
we-
you for that.
Yeah,
Feel
we
like
had
we
the
owe you that.
discussion too, and I fought against charging, so. Thank you.
Commissioner Clay, I really love the comment of that's what we're doing this work for. And I just wanna applaud you all. I know obviously we have some commissioners who were a big part of the planning. But also this was something that you all thought of when we were creating the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic plan. You know, 2 of the goals were, 1, start having the jurisdictions meet more regularly, which staff are doing on a more frequent basis. And then the second one was to get all of the partners around the table for conversations like this in a summit. And so I think it's really incredible to see this come to fruition and to just hear, you know, Veronica talking about all of the collaboration. You know, it wasn't just one entity. Now, certainly, I think Veronica played an oversized role in helping with Carol Goss and also Denise Munoz. But really, everybody got together to create this and make it the successful program it is. And I know, I think we look forward to future conversations and continuing to how to grow this. And so this feedback is really helpful and we'll certainly take it. But I do want to, you know, tip my caps to all of you and especially Veronica on the staff for helping coordinate this and, you know, getting us across the first finish line, but the race continues.
Sure, very good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the city of Lacey certainly had an outsized role in almost all of this, but I don't think it was unwarranted. And least of which, if we weren't well represented, it would have certainly been us sitting with egg on our faces, for lack of a better term.
I have just one last question. What do you think about the top table show?
The what?
The tabletop show?
Yeah, but that's what I was talking about earlier. I thought there was too many of them.
Okay, too many of them, okay. So not the workshops, the vendors or the exhibitors in the
Oh,
table?
the vendors.
Oh, no, oh, wait a minute, no, we're talking something.
Yeah, no, no.
The exhibitors.
Yeah,
You talk about the exhibitor.
Yes.
Oh, no, that's fine. I thought you was talking about in the afternoon when there were like 8 different
yeah,
groups
no,
broken
yeah,
out.
that I got. Yes.
What's the name
I
of that? Yeah.
I agree with you on that,
Okay.
but yes, I
Okay.
wrote it down. No, I mean the tables with the different organizations and community.
Okay, okay, exhibitors,
Yeah.
okay, you call it tabletop, okay, I'm
Mhm.
sorry.
That was good, good
Yeah,
information, good, networking and, yeah.
And they all got it for free as well, even if they were not organizing they, like Orcas, for example.
Yeah, Orca was very happy with
Oh, I'm glad
their
to hear
presence
that.
there, and they would love to do it again. They'd
Oh,
like
perfect.
to
I'm
do
glad to hear.
things like that. So I think they did a okay business.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to our commissioner reports and
Oh, I had one more statement on that.
I'm sorry.
I think that we had quality vendors, with the format we did with this past event. I'm not sure if expanding vendors would make sense. Just because a lot of the vendors were participating in a lot of the workshops, or any of the other activities happening at the summit. So I don't think it would be fair, to other vendors if we had a same or similar format. And then expanded the number of vendors because they wouldn't either get like any business or like driving interest or even just like number of people for them to talk to. I think we kind of had a great balance, if that makes sense, of like number of attendees and vendors showcasing, and then also like the workshops where there was like enough time built in so they could explore the workshops as vendors themselves, and then also like be able to be present at their tables to discuss with community members and everything else, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. I'm looking at my clock here. We've got commissioner reports and Shannon has her director report and a few more things. So let's get with it here. Anything from the commissioners other than what we've talked about tonight? At other times? Yes.
The non-endorsement of the Parks District, I would like to have another little training or even a handout on endorsements, because we have council member elections coming up, and I want to be clear about what as a commission member can or cannot do.
So I think maybe just in kind of quick summary, so state law, and it's RCW 4217A 555, and
He was ready.
I can send this out to you all as part of the follow-up, but it prohibits the use of public facilities to promote or oppose any ballot measure. So the question is, anything that's on the ballot, you can't use city facilities to either promote or oppose. And so that includes meetings like this one. That includes things like public comment, so it certainly, any organized city meeting, city facility, this state law would be applicable. If you have additional questions after that of maybe certain circumstances, I'd be happy to chat with you.
I just, under my report, I wanted to acknowledge that I attended the joint meeting of the city council and the North Thurston School Board. That was on May 13th at River Ridge. And the two issues that they discussed was homelessness and substance abuse. And then they had a pretty full audience and had a facilitated conversation, but there was no exchange or interaction between the audience and, that was going on. So we knew that was happening and didn't know how much of an opportunity that might present for any interaction with the school board itself. But I think that something will be forthcoming from that between the commission and members of the school board. And other than that, and the Veterans Forum that I thought gave us some terrific information the other night to round out our community input portion of what we've been about. It was a very busy month of May.
Yeah. Yeah, the Veteran Forum was a great turnout. Lots of really good suggestions that went on that day. That was one that was headed with me, Commissioner Hedgewood, and Garza. I don't know what else to say about that, John. I see your hand is up. Do you have any more to put out on there?
That's specifically regarding the Military and Veterans Forum.
Correct.
I think it was also very valuable. I hope that we do more of them, just like I hope we do more of all of our forums that we've done so far, because I believe to date we've only done one of each.
Yes.
And I think it's high time we revisit all of these, because we all know these issues are not a monolith and they are ever dynamic, particularly since, the beginning of this year or so, for no particular reason. So I think it is incredibly important for us to try, and I realize that we have constraints on resources and everything else, but I think that we should be looking into hosting more of these events of these kinds, even if we're looking at the same communities again, because perhaps even we'll get community participants that we did not have in the past, or even people that weren't here in the past that can now take advantage of them, or that know that we have a wider audience that's aware of the work that we're doing and that we've done so far, is more interested than ever to give us feedback on things that we can act on and for us to hear from. How's that?
I agree with that. Somebody may have thought about or heard about the veterans thing a little too late, bringing it back around. They may have heard the LGBTQIA plus one that a little too late and wanted to attend, or maybe had a little bit more to say. Maybe the current climate has changed, and so maybe want to bring some of that stuff back around and get more. Because one of the things that came up at this past forum was if we'd have brought stuff out or some of the questions out ahead of time, for people to look and kind of mull over so that they can come prepared with what they wanted to put out, would be good. Now, that would require knowing who's going to attend, but maybe the second time around we might have that availability. So
yeah, great points, Makita. And another thing that I heard kind of towards the wrap up, I think me and Cliff were maybe the last ones that kind of stuck around because we like to talk a little too much. I heard from other folks that were there that, even one of my friends that I invited, right, he's lived here as long as I have, and he didn't know the Veterans Hub existed until like 2 months ago, and him and I were driving by it and I pointed it out to him, and he didn't know this event was happening until I told him about it.
Yeah.
And so something that I never really put a lot of thought into until the night, and I'm talking to a few other attendees and other veterans at the event, is that, us in the military and veteran communities, each of us knows a handful of other veterans. And how many of those veterans have we told about these events or resources available to them? At most a few. And I'm not saying that, all of this lies like myself or Cliff or Makita, but the point being that, there's kind of like the grapevine effect, which I hear a lot, right, in our other communities, specifically like communities of diaspora, like our Black and African American communities and our LGBT communities. It's all about who you know and how you're connected. And so I think that us maybe leaning into that in the future for not only a military and veteran community events, but for other community events, I think can get more participation as well.
Well, something we heard that it was a piece of feedback that we've heard before was regarding how we communicated to the community.
yes.
And it was brought up that, oh, your utility bill, you have the brochure, the pamphlet in the utility bill. And most of them say, well, I don't read it.
Yeah.
But someone made a recommendation. They suggested that have a separate mailing, just that document. And that will increase the readership of that particular thing. That was one of the recommendations that they made.
And I also think I heard somebody
Well,
say put something on the outside of the envelope too. That way, you know, that way they know what to kind of expect. It's not the bill or whatever. And yeah, I thought that was good.
I'm anxious to get to Shannon because we're about out of time.
I'm just gonna point out, we've got about 8 minutes left,
Yeah.
and I do wanna highlight just on this topic, that we will be coming back to the commission with a report on the things we've heard. I know we did the report out, Peyton Griffin, our phenomenal public affairs intern, is gonna be compiling all of that information and then coming back to this body to present on it. And so we'd love to get more, feedback like the feedback you were talking about as we think about our next event. One of the things that we were considering as a potential option, and I do want to run it by the commission for some thought, and maybe we can talk about it at the next meeting, is focusing the next group on kind of adults in like 18 to 24, so around college age. If you recall, when we did the advisory board stipend program and the demographic survey, that is one of the groups that we don't get a lot of feedback from currently. And so we were thinking about partnering with SPSCC and St. Martin's on a possible forum, a joint forum with them to try to hear more younger adult voices, not necessarily youth, but younger adult.
That's good.
Great.
Okay,
You're on.
okay,
You're
perfect,
on.
great. So I did the update on the community forum, and so we'll circle back to that in July. Just wanna point out too for inspirational item, I know we didn't select an inspirational item this meeting earlier, but I do know Commissioner Hegwood would like to do the inspirational item for the meeting that we have at the end of this month.
Okay.
So just as a reminder, this is our May meeting that we are making up, so we will actually have another meeting, and it's gonna be on June 23rd. So I'll see you all in a couple of weeks if I don't see you before that, so just as a reminder for that. And then getting to the scheduled items that I had on here, so just wanna check in with the group. I had sent an email out on the Pride Night at the Lacey Night Market. I appreciate all of the feedback that you sent me on possible organizations and vendors for the contractor to reach out to. That list was provided to them. They jumped on it like the next day and they were emailing everybody, and it sounds like they're gonna have a really phenomenal lineup for that night market. And one of the things I heard discussed as part of this meeting, and again, sorry I wasn't here at the last one, was having a city booth. And so we do have a space reserved for a city booth and a Commission on Equity booth. So we'll have the city banner and the Commission on Equity banner hung. I've heard from a couple of you on participating. I just wanna kind of walk through the schedule. The event itself goes from 4 to 9:30, and we were thinking about doing about hour and a half shifts at the event. Veronica will be there, staffing that. We'll also see if we can't get another staff member there. So if you haven't communicated what your time preference is, or if you can make one, please just send me an email and let me know, and we can wrap that up and get the schedule out to
What's that
everybody.
date again?
Yeah, I'm not
13th.
available at all there
June-
for
June
anything.
13th,
I'm not available at all,
Friday.
Shannon,
might be able to,
for that.
yeah.
Yep. And we've got shifts going from, 4:30, 4 to 5:30, 5:30 to 7, and then a later one from 7 to closing. Yep. So don't have to give me an answer now, but just if you could
Yeah.
provide some more
Give you the
information.
answer, then that's it. That's the one I'm on.
You can, yes, yes, so for those who have said specifically, I can only do this one, or I wanna do this one, you got the first preference there, so. Last thing I have on my list here is just a retreat update, so I know you've seen a couple of emails come out from me asking you to fill out a doodle poll, so we could try to figure out some time, where we could all meet, and I think it is really important that, we all meet as part of this process. What we're finding is we're running into the summer months and it's getting pretty busy, especially during the weekends. And so I wanted to maybe provide a couple of options for the commission to consider. Number one, we could look at doing a retreat on like a Friday, whether it's a morning or an afternoon. Or two, we could start looking at some dates in September, especially as we start thinking about the next year and what the plan is, the work plan for 2026. So just wanted to open that up and get some feedback from commissioners on how we should look to proceed with the retreat.
I would opt for September, when we could still stick to a Saturday. A Friday would be rather limiting, I think, for a number of people. So somewhere in September, get the summer over with.
Vacations will be over with, kids will be back in school, that sounds good.
I'm fine
So
with that.
another September doodle poll.
Okay, so it sounds like you all can expect a new doodle. I'll keep it in the link when I send out the wrap-up informational.
Okay.
And with that, I'm done with my director report.
Okay.
We've got 3 minutes if we want to cram in one more topic.
I have one super quick announcement. We have acquired a license with a translation and interpretation company that we work with to have an app on all the staff cell phones for interpretation on any language. It's 24/7, and they also have ASL because it's through video. So we have the first training and well, it's gonna be on June 12th. The vendor from this coast is coming to train our staff. We already selected the staff and it's gonna be a 1 hour session. And we're also acquiring some iPads so that the front counters will have the iPad. So whenever we have any customers who don't speak English or who are deaf and cannot speak, we will have that available.
Nice.
Okay, John, I see your hand and we have 1 minute.
Yeah, really quick. I just wanted to say, on the topic of our intern being there and actually taking notes in person, I think is invaluable. Having them being able to digest what's being said and directly transcribing it in notes is infinitely more valuable than having it written on pieces of paper and then later digitized with no context. That is all.
Great, thank you. With that, then we stand adjourned at 8:29.
Right over.
Minute left. That's
Minute left.
awesome.
Less than a minute, because it was 8:20.